Thank you for that, Chair. Can I just say that I've, as Chair of the Authority, I've also written to Andrew already, thanking him for his contributions to our proceedings and wishing him well for his future as well.
We have two Park Authority applications, and of course we're all members on that. Yeah, that's items 8 and 10.
Thank you, Chair. Let me just... Okay. Thank you very much. The application is for the installation of a dewatering pipeline and associated infrastructure to transport ground and surface water from Balladon Quarry to the Blech Brook, approximately 2.6 kilometres to the south. The quarry has experienced significant issues in recent years with high water levels, which at times have made it impossible to work the deeper areas of the permitted mineral reserves. The site currently uses a natural fissure in the limestone to discharge water from the quarry, but recent testing has found a significant portion of this water is recirculated into the quarry. The use of the proposed pipeline will allow water to be discharged from the Blech Brook, which will allow for a more efficient water management strategy. Slide 1 on the screen there shows the route of the pipeline from the quarry leading down to the brook. The Environment Agency have issued a licence to the operator for the use of the pipeline to discharge up to 120 litres a second, which equates to approximately 10,000 cubic metres a day. These figures are the product of the EA's assessment of the brook and subsequent watercourses capacity. The lead local flood authority have also been consulted on the hydrological assessment submitted by the applicant and have also commented on the written objections received by the authority. Their expert advice is that the proposals will not cause an unacceptable increase in flood risk downstream of the outfall, so long as the proposed monitoring and mitigation strategy is adhered to. The monitoring strategy will include the installation of a data logger downstream of the outfall. In the event of the brook being in flood, the pipeline discharge rate will be reduced to greenfield runoff rates. In the event of an extreme flood, discharge from the pipeline will be stopped altogether. The riprap that will be installed in the brook downstream of the outfall will prevent erosion of the riverbanks and will significantly reduce the velocity of the water as it enters the brook. The proposals are therefore considered acceptable from a flood risk perspective. On this slide, we can see the diagrams and schematics for the discharge, the settlement lagoons, and also for the schematics of the outfall as it comes into the brook. There is a triple SI downstream of the proposed outfall, and the brook is home to many important species and habitats. Therefore, ensuring the water quality of the discharge water is a paramount consideration. Before the water is discharged through the pipeline, it will pass through a series of 4 settlement lagoons, which will allow any suspended solids to settle and will allow for daily inspections by quarry staff to identify any grease or oils prior to its discharge into the watercourse. The EA licence sets specific pH and suspended solid limits for discharge water. An automated data logger will be installed in the settlement lagoon, which will provide the operator with real-time data and will ensure these limits are complied with. The EA currently conduct quarterly inspections of the site and are able to make unannounced visits if there are concerns these limits are breached. Both Natural England and the authority's ecologist have commented on the application and are satisfied that the pollution control measures are suitably robust to protect ecological receptors downstream of the outfall. For these reasons, the proposals are considered to be acceptable from a water quality perspective. On this slide, we can see some of the problematic water in the working area of the quarry. This photo was taken in February of 2025, and the following slide was taken in the same place in October 2025, following a dry summer. This demonstrates the fluctuations, the severe fluctuations at the water level in the quarry and the trouble the operator can face. The route of the pipeline through the field system next to the brook will have an impact on the ridge and furrow landforms, which are a non-designated heritage asset. The applicant's justification statement for the need to run the pipeline along this route is considered sufficient to allow the impact, providing restoration works are carried out following the completion of the installation process. This is the field with the ridge and furrow that's looking north, so the pipeline will travel from the quarry southward through this field, which is where some of those ridge and furrow landforms will be impacted. The application triggers the requirement for a minimum biodiversity net gain increase of 10%. The applicant's BNG proposals demonstrates a significantly higher uplift, which has been agreed by the authority's ecologist. The BNG uplift will take place on land outside of the red line boundary, but within land under the applicant's control. The BNG uplift will be secured by way of a Section 106 agreement if the committee are minded to approve the application. This is a picture of the brook quite close to the outfall. Ultimately, this application will allow the quarry to continue to operate effectively and efficiently. The site provides significant quantities of high purity limestone, which is an important mineral that supports a broad range of industrial uses. The National Planning Policy Framework is clear that great weight should be given to the economic benefits of mineral extraction and requires mineral planning authorities to plan proactively to ensure a steady and adequate supply of these resources. The proposals are considered to be in broad compliance with the policies of the development plan and therefore has officer's recommendation for approval. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We have a number of speakers on. I don't know whether the speakers have got the list in front of them, whether that's the right order, but I have the first, I have Mr. Wood as the first speaker. Is that correct? Well, I've got Mr. Wood, Mr. Pettit, Mrs. Potter, Mr. Potter, and Mr. Atkins in that order at the moment. Is that right? Okay. Well, can I call Mr. Wood to come and make his case in that case, please? Now you'll find in front of you, yes, right, a button. Thank you very much.
Got the red light.
3 minutes to make.
Can everybody hear me okay? Good morning, my name's Andrew Wood, and thank you very much for having the opportunity to come and speak this morning. I'm a resident in Wood Eaves Cottage, a little bit further down the river and we're at Bentley Brook, a bit further down the valley. We've lived there with my wife Susie for 3 years now, and I've already seen, just in that short period of time, an immense change in the levels of water that come down the valley. We flooded already in Storm Babette. Frequently, we get all of our land consumed by the overflow of the river, and it has massive impacts. We've got significant riverbank erosion, beautiful wildlife that seems to be vanishing, and not only that, the roads around there, all of the land drains, all of the road drains are dysfunctional. The road becomes like a river, and it's a death trap waiting to happen. We feel significantly under threat and feel in danger most of the time. That is now. That is under the current situation with water and excess water. So we feel completely threatened by this. And I'm shocked to understand that we've got a level of recommendation to let this appeal go forward. It seems utter madness to a resident in your community. I can't understand it. We have a bridge on our land where the Bentley Brook has to go through. It's very low, and every time the water levels get high, in effect it blocks off this bridge, becomes a dam, and then it just comes back at us and doesn't get away at all, the water. So that's another huge problem for us. We're trying to mitigate already and do the simple things that we can to make sure we're not a victim like many others, residents in the area that already are. We're doing what we can. So the thought of this volume of water coming through sends shockwaves through to us. My colleague will also give you some better stats on the amount of water and the impact that it will have on us shortly. So to me, by giving authority for this planning application, you're just removing somebody else's problem, Tarmac's problem, and I understand they have a job to do, and putting it onto us as residents in the community. And it's a huge problem for us. And if you do this, we will flood again, no question about it. And it won't be our fault, it'll be your fault. So we'll be looking at mitigation or indemnity or something to make us feel like we can still reside in the community.
Thank you very much. The next speaker I have is Mr. Carl Pettit.
Good morning, everyone. Members of the Planning Committee, my name is Carl Pettit. I'm the Honorary Secretary of Leakin District Fly Fishing Association. We have leased the fishing rights on Bradbourne Brook for 40 plus years now. None of our waters are stocked. Catch and release is compulsory. We're passionate about the wider environment, and we undertake water quality monitoring and riverflow monitoring on a regular basis. Despite having a poor ecological status, Bradbourne Brook holds a good head of trout, grayling and bullheads, along with all 6 of the key indicator invertebrate species. We've spent many hundreds of man-hours and many thousands of pounds to improve the wider waterside environment. Working closely with Derbyshire Wildlife Trust, a grant of £40,000 for stock fencing will allow bankside vegetation to grow, aiding the recovery of the water vole population. All of our endeavours could be undone by the granting of this application. Limestone sediment from quarrying work covers the riverbed and sets as a solid impermeable barrier like concrete. It prevents fish and invertebrates from spawning in the gravel or silt by binding them together. Raised pH levels can seriously disrupt the ecological balance. The Tarmac application includes nothing that comes close to providing adequate sediment, flood or pH level control. If reached for extended periods, the pH and suspended solid levels set by the EA will cause ecological damage and harm to the fish and invertebrates. At volumes of 10,300 cubic metres per day, the pumped water will pass through all 4 settlement tanks or ponds in under 21 hours. I said hardly a slow rate of flow. Monitoring levels in Bletch Brook will not take account of flows in Bradbourne Brook, which could already be in flood. The environmental assessment that has been undertaken appears to focus on a very small area, when in fact many kilometres of river environment will be affected. The soakaway, as proposed, will run through and carry with it contaminants from historic quarry waste. I request that you study again in detail the objections raised in the letter from our Vice Chairman, Damien Robinson, and from those submitted on behalf of the Association by Fish Legal. I have copies of the letters here if you need one. If this application is approved, our 150 plus membership could end up witnessing the ruination of yet another of our country's most beautiful waterways. Our association is aware of the flood risk this application poses in the form of damage to properties and bankside erosion. We fully support and echo the objections made by all parties, whether present here today or not. Thank you for giving me the time to speak.
Thank you. Next I have Mrs. Sandy Potter.
Just to let you know before I start, I was going to give out handouts. I've only just been told, even though I told Rory Bradford I was going to be handing out some maps, just to give you an idea, because there's nothing here that actually shows where the watermill is compared to the output. But his colleague has said that I can actually hold up some of the pictures as I go along. So I hope that's all okay. And as I talk, I will be...
Well, let's see how we get on, shall we?
Yes,
Okay.
yes, okay. Lovely. Thank you. Good morning. I'm Sandy, owner and custodian of Bradbourne Mill, the oldest surviving watermill in Derbyshire. This Grade 2 listed landmark, with mill workings dated to 1625, stands on the Doomsday site beside two converging brooks, unchanged in the landscape for over 1,000 years. Its extraordinary survival is evidenced by a 150-year-old painting. The mill has deep historic significance, tenanted by Garradon Abbey in 1130, later rented by Dunstable Priory for 11 shillings in 1247. Ownership recorded from 1205 passed through the Bradbourne family, Sir Philip Gell and the Fitzherberts of Tissington. Its history is well documented in this book, and today it opens regularly to the public, bringing over 1,500 holiday visitors annually and generates millions of pounds in tourism for the local area, but also serving as a cherished community asset. It is therefore deeply concerning that Bradbourne Mill was omitted from the applicant's site plans. The mill comprises 3 Grade 2 listed residences and a converted barn located just 700 metres from the proposed discharge pipeline and only 5 metres from the brook. This application clearly contravenes with Chapter 16 of the National Planning Policy Framework, which gives great weight to protecting listed buildings and their settings. No clear or convincing justification has been provided, and equally, no monitoring system, measurements or structural surveys assessing the mill's stability. The Environmental Agency only safeguards rivers, and it's up to this committee to safeguard the other waterways and sources such as Bletch Brook, Havenhill Dale Brook and Bradbourne Brook. The alarming discharge volumes of over 10 million litres every day would cause continual land saturation, degraded water quality and rapid water level rise, backing up at the bridge, as you can see on the photographs. Backing up at the bridge and increasing flood risk to the B5056 and the mill itself, which lies below the road level. Therefore, any monitoring at Tarmec's output pipeline would act only after irreversible damage has occurred. Bradbourne Mill is intrinsically linked to the brook, altering water volume of quality, threatens its foundations and its 400-year-old machinery, the SSI ecosystem and the wildlife. Finally, Tarmac, a £2 billion turnover UK organisation, operates a quarry mine below the water table and subject to continual flooding. This demonstrates that the operation is economically unsustainable and should not be transferred onto residents, farmers or irreplaceable heritage assets who lack the financial means to mitigate such risks. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for listening.
And lastly, I have Mr. Nick Atkins. Oh, sorry, I haven't. I've got Mr. David Potter. I do apologise. Speaking on behalf of the Parish Council. I beg your pardon? This is him, is it? Okay.
Just before I start and before I press go on my timer, there are some videos to see of the Bletch Brook after a moderate night of rain. It wasn't a storm, it wasn't anything severe, it never made the news. This was just a night of fairly heavy rain. That's going to be playing while I'm talking. I wish that maybe you could ask to watch it again at the end, I don't know, but I would really hope that it doesn't distract from what I'm about to say. And as the Chair said, I am speaking on behalf of Balladon and Bradbourne Parish Council, of which I'm also a resident of the area. Okay. So, good morning. I would like to start by taking a moment to quantify what is actually being proposed in the scale. Tarmac intend to discharge 120 litres a second of water into the Bletch Brook. That's over 10 million litres of water a day. Now, that's enough to fill Bakewell swimming pool 36 times in one day. That's a night of rain. 36 Bakewell swimming pools on top of that will cause devastation. The Bletch Brook cannot cope with this. Tarmac's own flood assessment report admits currently the ford regularly becomes impassable and the Triple S eyesight regularly floods. So the question is simple. Why did Tarmac think it's acceptable to pump over 10 million litres of water into a small brook and increase the risk of flooding to local residents, their home, farmland, wildlife and historic buildings? Tarmac claims the water level at Tissington Ford will raise by 7 centimetres or 3 inches. That would mean the base depth of the ford becomes about 9 inches as opposed to 6. The AA, the RAC and North Yorkshire Fire and Rescue on their website clearly state that is unsafe to drive through. And only 3 inches more is enough to make a car float and could wash away. The ford is a vital route for residents, farmers, couriers, tourists and the emergency services. Under this proposal, it would be unsafe and impassable for the majority of the year, and approving this application could put lives at risk. The risk of flooding. At the ford, it briefly becomes 6 metres wide, but at the discharge point and down at Woodeves Cottage, it's about 1 metre wide. So that 7 centimetres suddenly becomes 42 centimetres or 16 inches of additional water. That would flood Woodeves Cottage and it would put Bradbourne Mill, other properties at Woodeves and Fenny Bentley at severe risk of flooding. This application at a time of a global climate emergency is quite clearly irresponsible. Tarmac's own wildlife survey was conducted during one afternoon walk along a pipeline and at the discharge point, hardly in depth. Had they have looked further, they would have seen an abundance of wildlife, including kingfishers, otters, and Derbyshire Wildlife Trust are currently investing heavily in Bradbourne Brook to protect the water voles and their habitat. This proposal directly undermines that work and threatens the local wildlife and the precious ecosystem that exists. If Balladon Quarry is no longer viable because it is mined under the water level, then this is a commercial problem for Tarmac and not a burden to be imposed on the public. And for those reasons, I urge you to reject this application. Thank you for your time. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much.
And thank you for the extra 12 seconds.
We're not that unreasonable, actually. I've got now, sorry, I called him once before, Mr. Nick Adams, please.
Morning members, my name's Nick Atkins, Strategic Planning Manager for Tarmac and responsible for Balladon Quarry. Your officer's detailed report and presentation this morning, together with your site visit yesterday, will hopefully provide you with sufficient understanding of the need and principle for the proposed development. In response to the concerns you have heard, I'm going to limit my presentation to re-emphasising the proposed systems that will be installed as part of this development to ensure water quality is protected and downstream flood risk and impact is not exacerbated. The Environment Agency are the responsible operator for managing ordinary water courses and are satisfied that the discharge is acceptable as they have already granted the necessary consent to discharge. That licence includes limits on flow rates, pH levels, suspended solids, compliance of which is monitored and enforced by the Environment Agency, who already visit the site on a routine 3-monthly basis. The system will pump water from the quarry at the base of the quarry by an electric pump and a series of settlement lagoons prior to discharge down the pipeline. If a problem is identified at the base of the quarry, pumping is suspended to prevent water from even reaching the settlement lagoons. We will have 4 lagoons in series to provide adequate settlement of the suspended solids, and those lagoons will be subject to regular maintenance and desilting. The lagoons will be visually checked at the start and end of each shift, and a real-time data logger will be installed on those lagoons, assessing pH levels and suspended solids constantly against the discharge consent limits, and in the event of a trigger would automatically shut a valve, preventing any discharge of contaminated water to the pipeline and subsequently to the brook. In terms of flow rates, the hydrological and flood risk assessments undertaken by our external hydrology consultants conclude that the Bletchbrook and Bradbourne Brook do have sufficient capacity to accommodate the approved flow rates prescribed in the discharge consent. We will manage those flow rates by ensuring the control valve is calibrated to not allow more volume than the discharge consent permits. In further recognition of concerns regarding downstream flooding, Tarmac are proposing additional mitigation in the form of an automated water level monitor to be installed at the Gores Hill Farm culvert, which will automatically reduce and prevent water leaving site through the pipeline when the brook is in flood. That will prevent any water escaping when the situation that Mr. Potter highlighted is occurring. With these measures, no objections have been raised by the statutory consultees, including the authority's ecologists, archaeologists, the Environment Agency or Natural England, on any potential adverse ecological impacts to fish species, to local nature conservation designations or increased flood flow. The pipeline is considered essential development for consented mineral to be worked. The scheme incorporates numerous manual and automated systems to ensure water quality and flood risk is managed. There is no external stakeholder objections, and I invite you therefore to accept the recommendations of your officer. Thank you. I'm sorry for going over slightly.
Thank you very much. Right, members. Can I just start off with 1 or 2 questions of my own, just to sort of get the thing going? The assessments that have been done by ecologists, conservationists, Environment Agency, and the rest of them about the impact of what happens on this river, how far away from the site are they looking? I mean, I think the point is being made here that all these things are being measured close to the brook, so close to the pipeline, whereas the actual impact is going to be felt much further away. And I'm wondering how far those considerations have been taken into account in the advice we're getting from the various agencies. Do you understand the point I'm making?
Yes, Chair, absolutely. I think particularly with relation to flood risk, we take our specialist advice from the lead local flood authority, in this instance Derbyshire County Council. They have an understanding and data and practicable experience of working with the entirety of a watercourse. Many of the, in fact all of the written objections that we've received relating to flood risk have then been relayed to the flood risk team and have been assessed. So I think it's reasonable to conclude that, particularly in terms of flood risk, the entirety the impact on the entire watercourse has been considered and has been factored into their no objection response.
So, for example, when Mr. Wood tells us about the problems he's having living close, I don't know where his house is in relation to this, but he's having in relation to the stream as it is, that will have been fully taken into consideration somewhere.
Williams Cottage, that's where we are.
Yeah, I know. I don't know where that is. but let's take the point.
So, yes, again, the impact on the entire watercourse will have been assessed, and it's important to remember that the proposed monitoring and mitigation scheme will have been factored into that assessment. So we see the videos, and clearly there are issues of flooding around this watercourse, but the considered expert advice is that as long as the proposed monitoring and mitigation scheme is implemented and adhered to, that there will be no exacerbation of events, for example, that we've seen in this video.
But I think we've been told that actually the water level could be a bit higher, and if the water, I mean, even if it's only an inch higher, that will have an impact beyond the existing impact, if you get what I mean. Haven't we been told that the water level could be higher in certain locations? That's why we looked at the ford yesterday.
Yes, it will be during average summertime flows and at times when the watercourse isn't in flood and there isn't a reduction in the discharge from the pipeline.
So your point is that when it's in flood, it'll be no higher than it would. Right, okay, right, I get that. Members. Mike Chaplin, then Rachel.
Yes, I was one of the members on the site visit yesterday, and so we were given quite a lot of explanations, but we hadn't, at that time, we'd not heard the objectors, which we've been listening to this morning. I just wanted to pick up on 3 points. One relates to the settlement tanks, and whether, given the flows that are up to, is it 10,000 cubic metres of water, if that's flowing into those settlement tanks, is that enough? Is that 21 hours long enough to allow all the sediment to settle in those tanks? I mean, it was explained that
I understand the question.
we saw the snake way that it would flow through the tanks, and understand that. But is that enough to take out the sediment and reduce the pH levels?
Well, I think the assessment in the hydrological assessment provided is that it is. And again, we need to come back to the monitoring strategy. So the automated data logger that will be in situ within the settlement lagoons will mean that water will not be discharged if it is in breach of those limits set out by the EA. It's also important to consider that the EA's permit has been provided, and those levels and limits have been provided with the understanding that it would be a regime of settlement lagoons to treat the water. So yes, I think essentially it's the expert advice is that it will be sufficient.
Okay, the second point, the protection around Bradbourne Mill, and wondered what work had been done to make sure that that would not be adversely affected, given that I believe it's a Grade 2 listed building. Certainly got a lot of heritage importance to it.
Again, it comes back down to the expert advice that we've had from the Flood Risk Authority, who will have looked at the application in the full, who will understand the course, the route of the water course, the potential risks and threats that poses to properties nearby, and ultimately that the implementation of that monitoring and mitigation strategy has led them to, in their considered and expert advice, recommend that there will not be an impact of additional flood risk for properties downstream of the outfall.
Thank you. The third point I wanted to pick up on was the
You don't want
Well,
to... Sorry, are you raising your third point?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah,
okay.
this will be the
okay.
last one, and I'll shut
No,
up
that's
after
fine.
that.
I wasn't sure
promise.
whether you were raising it or not.
One of the speakers spoke about the brook narrowing further downstream, which would raise the water level substantially. And that could then have an impact for land and presumably settlement around the brook there. What work had been done to make sure that well, what I'm trying to say is what work has been done to make sure that impact would be mitigated, because that did seem to be quite a substantial leap. I think it was 42 centimetres the water level would rise further as the brook narrowed.
I mean, at the risk of sort of repeating myself, these are the assessments that have been made by the Environment Agency and by the local flood authority. Their assessments deal with the capacity of the watercourses, and our recommendation is informed by their expert advice. So they'll have looked at the application in the round, they'll have looked at the capacity of the watercourse, the velocity of the water as it travels out of the outfall, and the way that it will impact the ordinary flow of the watercourse, and have come to their conclusion that they don't object.
We're back into expert opinion again. Right, I've got Rachel Bennett next.
Yeah, I'd like to seek 2 points of clarification. So the first is the flood risk modelling. Has that been conducted on current rates of rainfall or on future projected rates of rainfall that we may see with more extreme climate conditions? That's my first point.
Yes, so the Flood Risk Authority deal with the most up-to-date data and predicted forecasting. They are the authority that is probably most acutely aware of the environmental challenges that we deal with, especially with events of heavy rainfall, and are still satisfied that capacity in the channel is such that it is acceptable, providing that mitigation and monitoring strategy is adhered to.
Okay, my second point is, have any alternative options been explored for dealing with the waterlogging issue in the quarry that don't involve a direct pipeline into the brook? Thank you.
There is already an existing water management strategy which involves pumping the water into a natural fissure in the limestone, but the hydrogeology of the area is very complex, and it has been found through a recent series of dye testing that a lot of that water is being recirculated into the quarry. So it's in the event that they're pumping a lot of the water out, and then ultimately it's coming straight back into the quarry. There is no other reasonable alternative except for this if we're talking about discharging water from the quarry to be outside of the quarry rather than using this fissure method.
Okay. I've got Bill Hanley next.
Thank you. We deal with a lot of very sort of site-specific or issues on this committee. Picking up on what Patrick said earlier, it seems to me that I was part of the one of the members that visited the site yesterday, and we went to the quarry and then down to where the outfall will be, and then we went on to a very short distance on to the ford. But it strikes me, having listened to what's been said, that the impact of this proposal is over a much wider area, and it would have been helpful, I think this is a case where it would have been helpful to have a look at the water catchment area where the river goes. I've been trying to follow it on looking at the map on my phone. I think it goes into the Bradbourne Brook, I think, and then it changed its name several times and possibly goes through Ashbourne. But I think, all those are very small watercourses, so I think this is a good example of where we're not just dealing with the site, we're dealing with quite a big area, and I feel I'm lacking a bit of context and information here, to be honest. and some of the questions that have been asked, the people that should be answering aren't here. They're other, from other agencies. You know, we're asking questions and we're perhaps not able to find the answers. I don't know, that's just an observation, not criticism, but just both of them are observations. But I think a bigger context of what we're talking about would be really helpful, if that makes sense to colleagues. Yeah.
Right. Any other members? Sorry, do you want to reply to that?
Yeah, if I may, Patrick. Thanks, Bill. It's a good point. I think do have to bear in mind that the local flood authority will have considered downstream effects and the wider catchment. They know water is coming from this location. They know it doesn't just get to a certain point and then disappear. They are taking into consideration that it will have a downstream effect on the wider catchment. So I think members should just bear that in mind, that it has been considered. Thank you, Chair.
But as I understand it, if I've got it correctly, all these fears about downstream flooding when high should not be affected by this proposal, because it'll all be switched off.
Correct.
If there's a flooding problem occurring.
Yeah.
That's my
So in periods of time where there is a flood event,
judgment of the thing,
it will be closed off so it doesn't make it any worse. The water will be retained within the quarry void, essentially.
So in a sense, if you, as I understand it, if you worry about what's going down in Ashbourne, for example, it should have been cut off somewhere up the thing. But there's an interesting question that goes on from that. If the system isn't working well at the top end, with what speed and with what ability are we able to get the thing corrected quickly? I mean, what are the powers and the not just necessarily of ourselves or the agencies to say, hold on a moment, something's going wrong, it's got to be put right now, rather than serving a notice on them and telling them that must serve an enforcement notice and go through an appeal and all the other things.
Yeah, so if either the Environment Agency or the lead local flood authority were notified of a flood event in this locality, they could then contact the operator and say, look, there's a flood risk issue at the moment, can you shut off the discharge? And there's a manual mechanism to do that at the site.
Yeah, it's a question of how you find out about this. Because if it's only being monitored every 3 months, I mean, if it's, for example, not about necessarily the quantity of water, but it's about the amount of, I don't know what the word is, silt in the water that shouldn't be there.
So, as was mentioned previously, the Environment Agency do monitor the site, but there's a real-time data logger in position on the site as well to monitor the levels. We could put a condition on that to require more frequent submissions to ourselves, which we could seek to verify if that's a concern of the committee. I think the controls are there through the environmental permit, and we shouldn't seek to replicate controls through the planning system which are there through other regulatory regimes. So that's there, but if there is a real concern, we could try to put something more stringent on.
This is a very, very fast ball for you. But would an injunction be possible in those circumstances? An urgent injunction? If we were finding stuff coming out of this pipe that shouldn't, would an injunction be possible?
It wouldn't be an injunction. I mean, the Environment Agency it would be in breach of the permit, so they would take action to rectify the situation and close it off. If it was found the site was operating in breach of one of its planning conditions, we could take the necessary enforcement action. We could serve a temporary stop notice, which is very quick to stop the operation. So the enforcement controls are there in the event of an issue occurring.
Any other members? Ken?
Thanks, Chair. I mean, to an extent, you were saying the things that were running through my mind. That it seems to me that there are two issues here. One is the impact of, and we need to differentiate between the impact of natural phenomena, like that, of the video that we've seen, and the potential for what is being proposed exacerbating that problem. Yeah? And it does seem to me that at the moment, the checks and balances that the company have put in place as a result of the restrictions that the EA licence is imposing mean that if the pH, if the silt levels in the lagoons goes above the recommended level, then the process automatically stops. If the pH in the lagoon water reaches its limit and goes beyond it, the automatic systems cut off, it stops pumping. If the level of water in the brook reaches a specific point where there's a danger of flooding downstream because of the additional water from the quarry, then the system closes down and stops pumping. So what more is required to ensure that levels don't reach a dangerous level? It seems to me that the mitigation that's being proposed meets the perceived levels of danger. The only other element which I'm unsure about is if there was, as we inquired yesterday on the site visit, if there was a power failure, then we're told that there are backup power systems in the quarry to make sure that there isn't a failure. Is there an automatic cutout facility if the telemetry at the water level below the output fails for whatever reason? If that fails, does that shut the system down? So there are points beyond which I don't see how we can. I understand the concerns of the objectors, but what we're talking about is the impact of natural phenomena here. There's a danger that it could be exacerbated. Those dangers have been recognised and have been mitigated against. I'm unsure as to what the concern beyond that is, apart from failure at some point, and that does seem to have been covered. I'd be interested to hear if that is not the correct assessment.
No, I mean, I think one must respect the concerns that have been expressed by the local people, because I would certainly be asking questions myself in their circumstances. We don't allow contributions from the gallery, I'm afraid. Other members, right, Martin Beer.
Right. I didn't have the opportunity to join the visit yesterday because of other commitments, but has a full engineering assessment as opposed to environmental assessment been undertaken of the buildings that could be affected downstream? There's been there've been a number of quite serious incidents of collapses because of scarring, where the ones I know about are railways, because they hit the press because they closed the railway. And whilst the environmental assessments and the fact that these structures are regularly inspected, they haven't shown any problem until they have just collapsed.
So your point being, I understand this situation you've just saying, but what is the point you're making out of that?
The point I'm making is, as opposed to the environmental assessments, has an engineering assessment been made?
Okay, right.
An engineering assessment hasn't been made, but that is based on the assessment that has been made. The impact downstream primarily is on flood risk, which we've covered and understand that because of the various design features of the pipeline and the way it discharges, it will not increase the velocity of the watercourse further downstream, which is one of the key issues when you consider erosion, bankside erosion. So these are issues that have been considered by the experts at the Flood Authority, and they're happy that the operation of this pipeline will not increase rates of erosion. It will not increase the velocity of the watercourse downstream, which is essentially what could potentially have an impact on buildings.
Yes, okay. Ginny Priestley, then Janet Dugdale.
Thank you, Chair. I understand the points that Ken Smith was making, that there have been concerns raised, and this is a very thorough report we've got in front of us, where every point has been examined and we've had expert opinion on the different risks. A question, if we were to approve this, could we put a condition in that we are going to have problems with flooding regardless, that, you know, this is climate change. Could we put a condition in that if there is a flood warning, that they stop discharging water so that doesn't exacerbate what is already going to be a big problem? Is that possible to do that? Because there is already a problem here. If there is a problem with flooding anyway because of the weather, could they stop pumping water from the quarry?
Thanks, Jenny. So, given the consultation responses, I don't believe that is necessary, but if that's something which members consider to be a material consideration, potentially it's possible to put that condition on there. But the lead local flood authority haven't specified that it should happen.
It would be a very difficult condition to draft, actually, wouldn't it?
It would be, because what is a flood warning? Who's it come from? When's it issued? It's difficult.
And how far ahead is it a warning for? There are I think it would be a very difficult condition, actually, to draft and in practice enforce. The better route is to make sure that
the monitoring equipment is there.
The process.
So when the levels rise to a certain extent, it either slows down the rate of discharge or it cuts it off completely. So appreciate what you're saying, but I think those controls you're seeking are already there in the proposal.
Okay. I have Janet Dugdale next.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'm really struggling with the idea that increased volume in the river won't lead to increased velocity and therefore riverbank erosion. I would have thought it's going to, and we've talked about flood risk and mitigation for that, but this is going to lead to enduring raising of the river levels and increase of flow in the river. Looking at the riverbanks yesterday, because I did go on the visit, then they're quite sort of friable rock. They're not going to withstand a lot of extra flow a lot of the time without eroding more. I'm just wondering if there's mitigation that can be put in advance downstream to ensure stability of the riverbanks because of this more permanent increase in river flow and river levels that will be coming from the flow from the quarry. This isn't to do with flood. This is the normal flow that we'll see on a daily basis.
Expert assessment has been made on the impact on velocity by the flood authority. The riprap that will be installed just below the outfall is a series of sort of large boulders and rock structures. So as the water enters the brook and enters the watercourse, that velocity will be taken out. Again, this is something that we've had expert advice on. They've made the assessments and they are happy that velocity will not be increased further downstream.
But is it just velocity, though? It could be quantity, couldn't it, that could cause Janet's problem? Have I got that right, Janet?
If you're putting more water into the system, it's got to raise the level of the river on an average basis or a daily basis while that's happening. And that by itself will increase the amount of erosion on the riverbanks because the level's raised. And it has that impact being considered is all I'm asking.
I understand the question. I'm not sure if I understand the answer yet. Do you understand the point that she's making?
Sorry, Chair, yeah, I do. I would just like to reiterate the fact that some of the concerns, all of the concerns that have been submitted to us from the objectors have then been forwarded to the Flood Authority, who again have come back in light of those comments with their assessments. and have still offered no objections to the proposals.
Okay, right. Bill Hanley, again, I want to get this wound up shortly, if I may, please.
Just a question. So, in terms of water levels, where are the monitoring sites that are being used? Because that isn't clear.
The primary automated logger will be at the Gorse Hill culvert, which is approximately 100 metres downstream of the outfall.
My thought is that the water levels will be raised because it seems like quite a complicated catchment. There's little brooks and streams coming down from what I can see, although it would be better having a better map. There should be monitoring further downstream as well. If water levels, from what the concerns are, if water levels are being raised downstream, then that's a concern, not just immediately by the outfall. I don't know, does that make sense? Does it make sense to me? I'm not
Well, that's a question. Ken, have you got one? Then I'm going to ask the officers just to answer that. And then
Thank you, Chair. Mine was more to do with flows. We hear a lot of figures. What is it? 10,000 cubic metres, 10 million litres, and so on. I find it quite difficult to envisage that. The 120 litres per second outflow seems like a large amount, but do we know what the flow in the brook is normally, what the litrage per second flow is, to get an idea of the ratio of quantity being added to existing? Because I think somewhere in the report I read that it was the equivalent, that 10,000 cubic metres was the equivalent of 2.5 Olympic swimming pools, which is equally difficult to envisage. But on an hourly basis, I think that was a quarter of an Olympic swimming pool, which is, again, a meaningless statistic, but it's a relatively small amount of water, I would suggest, at one level. But how does that, do we know how it compares with what is in the brook at the moment and its flow?
right, can we answer these two questions?
Yeah, of course. I mean, so we can certainly examine the possibility of attaching a condition to the consent for additional data loggers further downstream, if the committee deem that to be appropriate. And to Ken's point, the average flow and capacity of the watercourse and the subsequent watercourses was set out in the applicant's hydrological assessment, which underpins the application, which is, again, the document that the local flood authority have understood, assessed and commented on.
That's fine, Rory, but I wondered if we actually had the statement of the figures available now. I know it's awkward, I know it's difficult, but it would just, I think, give members a bit more confidence in coming to a decision. I don't know whether it's accessible.
We could go and get a copy of the HIA, Ken, if that would be helpful.
We'd have to adjourn, I think, if that was going to be the case. Is it an important...
Well, I think it would be extremely useful to get an idea of what proportion, what's the flow per second, and what is against the 125 litres that's being proposed to be added. At a maximum, we need to remember, that's a maximum addition. I defer to members and
Ginny?
Yeah, I agree with Ken. I'd like to know what the percentage increase is, which would have a lot more meaning to us.
How long will it take you, Tom? How long will it take you?
Well, for me to run upstairs and get the laptop and find
Shall I make it 10 minutes? Right. I'm now going to move, members, that we adjourn this meeting until 11:10 and start again then. Is that agreed? Agreed. Thank you. Okay. Sorry about the delay, members. we seem to be in a position to answer the question. I've rather forgotten what the question was now, but I'm sure somebody else will know the answer to that. Rory, would you like to deal with it, please?
Yes, thank you, Chair. So we have a hydrological impact assessment which is conducted by specialists and, as stated, has been reviewed by the Flood Risk Authority. Their assessment, which is a series of quite complicated calculations, indicates that during medium flow rates through the brook, so that an average flow in the brook, the full discharge of 120 litres a second would account for approximately 10% increase in the volume of water that's in the watercourse at any one time. This is something that's been provided by experts and has subsequently been corroborated by the Flood Authority.
Well, you better answer that, but I don't want contributions from the back of the room, thank you.
So the 10% is at the smallest capacity downstream of the outfall, which is downstream of the confluence with the unnamed watercourse. So that would be before the confluence of the Bletch Brook and the Havendale Brook. So that's reasonably close to the outfall, is where the watercourse has the lowest capacity, and that's where it would account for 10%. There are quite a lot of areas along the watercourse where the available capacity at medium flow rates is much higher, and so would account for a lot less than 10%.
Right, thank you. Does that answer your question, Ken?
It does, Chair, insofar as there aren't actual figures of litrage per second, but it does give, I hope, give us a better impression of the kind of quantity that's anticipated to be added at median flow, as Rory has said. So, yeah, thank you.
Okay. Well, members, we're at a position now where we're having to rely heavily upon expert technical opinion, because without that, it would be impossible to make a judgment of any sort. And because of the nature of this application, if we are going to do anything other than adopt the recommendation, we have to be very, very clear about what the issues would be that would cause us to take a different route. Matt, you haven't spoken yet, so...
Yeah, it was... sort of thinking about your point, is there a mechanism for us to get an assessment that we think, to defer this and get an assessment for us to have an assessment, so that because this is a big issue, this is a big deal. We get one chance to have an opinion on this, and that this could affect, this could potentially affect people in a significant way for a long period of time.
I mean, this would be members' prerogative, you could, but that's effectively what the Lead Local Flood Authority have done. They're independent. They're not, on the side of the applicant or the residents or anybody else. So they've done that independent assessment. It's their advice the committee should consider when making a decision on this application.
Right. Bill?
I think one thing that I think we talked about, following on from my question, is about these monitors, the flow or river level monitors, and that's something that I'd be keen, and perhaps colleagues would be keen to see where would they be? Where would they be? I mean, I've no idea where to put them, but I guess that just having one isn't sufficient. That would be helpful to have several or more downstream, which would then inform the quarry one way or the other. So that's something that, if we were going to defer it, for instance, it would be good to see on a map with some technical explanation behind it. I don't know if that makes sense.
Thanks, Bill. I think that's a good point. I think that's something which could be conditioned. Probably don't need to defer it. Locations could be agreed. And we can take input from residents on that as well.
Right, Martin, I really would like to get to some stage in this debate, yes.
Could,
When we come to agree the condition.
could we ask for a condition which requires the riverbank to be physically inspected at regular intervals, possibly once a year?
I think the difficulty with that is what's the outcome the authority's hoping to achieve? You could say, well, okay, it has eroded a little bit, but how do you quantify that that's because of the additional water coming out of the quarry and what would have happened just naturally anyway? So I think it's a good idea, but unfortunately it's not really something which is implementable or enforceable, so it wouldn't meet the test, I'm afraid.
What I would be looking, what I would hope that they would be looking for would be underscoring along the along the route.
Yeah.
But certainly for the area close downstream.
Yeah, again, I think the problem is how would you quantify whether that underscoring has occurred because of the discharge from the quarry and what would have occurred by the natural flow of the water. I think the assessments have been done such that they're taking account of all that, and if rate levels rise, they'll be shut off to prevent these things from occurring. So it's a good idea, but unfortunately I don't think it's going to meet the test for a planning condition on this occasion.
Right, so I'm going to go back to where we were. We have to rely upon the expert evidence that we're given unless we can get alternative expert evidence. We've been given advice on Matt's point, and if we accept the extra conditions that were suggested, the question is whether anybody is prepared to move that as just to get the debate going.
Could we just hear the conditions, please, before then?
Can you remind me of what those two conditions were? There was one about monitoring downstream.
Yeah,
and
agreed.
Yeah.
Good. Yeah, to agree some additional locations for monitoring further downstream.
And yeah, okay. That was
I
it, was
think
it?
that's what it was, yeah.
Yes, okay. Right. We need a proposal of some sort from the floor. Ginny?
I'll propose that we approve this.
You propose it. Is that seconded by anybody? That's seconded by Lee Hartshorn. Thank you. Has anybody got any suggested amendments to that? In that case, I'm going to put it to the vote. All those in favour of approving it on the terms set out in this report, plus the extra condition, and I'm sure officers have understood when they're drafting the detailed conditions the concerns that have been expressed around this table. All those in favour of the motion? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Those against? 1, 2. Those abstaining? 1, 2, 3. That is carried. Thank you very much for your attendance and for helping us to concentrate on some of those issues. Thank you.
I'd just like to go on the record that in my comments I stated that at the ford they're increasing the water level by 50%, from 6 inches to 9 inches. That's in the ford where it's 6 metres wide. So in Bletch Brook, which is much smaller, it's certainly not 10%, and I can guarantee that.
Right. The next item on the agenda is agenda item 7, a local needs dwelling at Hernstone Lane, Peak Forest. Right. Hannah's going to lead this report.
Thank you, Chair. This is the planning application, land adjacent to 25 Hernstone Lane, Peak Forest, and the application is for erection of a local needs dwelling. The application came to Planning Committee December at the end of last year, and the application was deferred on the request of members for the proposed size of the dwelling to be reduced so that it had a gross internal area of 97 square metres and to revisit the design of the development. The application now comes back to Planning Committee, so I'll just run you back through the slides that we looked at last month. The site location is shown on the screen, so it's this triangular parcel of land to the south of Hernstone Lane. I'm not sure whether I can point on this, Brian. Can I?
Does the point just... I think it does.
No, never mind.
No, it's linked.
Yeah, don't worry. So yeah, the triangular parcel of land that you see there to the south of Hernstone Lane, which is the main road that goes through the centre of Peak Forest. You've got 25 Hernstone Lane to the northwest of the site, and that is a nearest residential property with further residential properties on the opposite side of the road. The site and the surrounding area, including the land to the south, forms part of the Peak Forest Conservation Area. And just so members are aware as well, there are some public rights of way in close proximity to the site. So there's one that runs along the western edge of the site, along the driveway associated with number 25. There's one that runs further to the southeast through the nearest building group that you see on the south of Hernstone Lane. And they basically converge further south of the site. This is the proposed site plan, so it has been subject to some minor changes from the previous committee meeting. One of the points raised by members was whether the dwelling could be moved closer to number 25 Hernstone Lane, so that is what we have requested. There has been a minor change. I don't have the exact figure, but I believe it's approximately 1.5 meters closer. And then in terms of the driveway, that has also moved slightly further west on the site. And the vehicle turning area that you can see on the screen is shorter. We had asked whether the dwelling could move closer and whether the turning area could be reduced further. Maybe we could look at sympathetic surfacing. We are advised that this is a scheme that the applicant would like members to consider. I will just add that there's some landscaping that has been introduced on the south edge of Hernstone Lane between the road and the turning area. Some of that does look to encroach into the visibility splay, but in the event of an approval, that could be something that could be dealt with through a landscaping condition. These are the proposed floor plans, so very similar to last time. You've got living space, dining room, kitchen at ground floor, 3 bedrooms at first floor, and the drawing confirms that the internal area was 97 square metres. And the proposed elevations, again, similar to last time, so it's a traditional double-fronted property, would be constructed of limestone with a slate roof. You've got the side elevations there and also section drawings, so there's reference to a ramp that is for the driveway onto Hernstone Lane. That's because there's a difference in levels between the site and the road, which you can see on the next picture, which is taken from the end of the driveway next to 25 Hernstone Lane, so this is to the west of the site, looking towards that triangular parcel of land which is slightly lower than the road. This is looking straight on at the site, so you're looking southwards towards open agricultural land beyond the site. And that's looking back at the site from the southeast. This is just taken from the opposite side of the road, so you can't quite see the site. Again, that's because the levels are slightly lower. And that's just a final photo, so that's along the frontage of the site to the road, and that's where the access would be proposed. I'll just go back to the site plan. So in terms of the recommendation, they do remain the same as the last planning committee meeting, and there were 2 recommended reasons for refusal. I appreciate there was quite a bit of discussion at the meeting about the first reason in particular, so I did just want to expand a little bit on the justification behind how that reason has been put together, essentially. So the references to policies HC1 and DMH1, and HC1 is the policy that we have in the development plan that says that provision will not be made for housing solely to meet open market demand in the national park, but that exceptionally new housing can be accepted that addresses eligible local needs for homes that remain affordable with occupation restricted to local people in perpetuity. We then have policy DMH1, which basically expands on how we look at assessing applications for affordable housing. And that says that affordable housing can be provided in locations such as Peak Forest, provided there is a proven need for the dwelling and any new build housing is within the size thresholds in that policy, which I know members will be familiar with, but just for clarity, for a one-person house, 39 square metres, for a two-person, 58, and so on up to a five-person, which is 97 square metres. There's supporting text to that policy, which is basically set out. It explains the approach behind the policy, and it also helps in applying the policy. You won't have some of these paragraphs in front of you, so I can revisit them if you'd like me to, but just to refer to paragraph 6.24 in that document, and it states the authority has agreed with housing authorities that it will require the same information when individuals apply to build affordable housing for their own use as what the housing authority would look at. So in this case, we've got evidence of a home options report that the applicant has submitted. That home options report is something that's come through High Peak Borough Council, and it basically clarifies that the applicant has a need for a one-bedroom house because they're forming a single-person household. So that's sort of the need that the Housing Authority look at, and it's also what we look at as a National Park Authority. Just to refer to the committee report in that respect, it does set out a definition of need, which is an indicator of an existing deficit. So that's different to demand, which is something relating to individual choice and affordability. The other paragraph I just wanted to refer you to is 6.48 in the Development Management Policies document. That refers specifically to homes being built by individuals, and it states that the size of the housing will be controlled in line with the original applicant's housing need. In these cases, there can be greater flexibility afforded in terms of the size requirement up to the 97 square metres, and in order to explore that flexibility and apply it, the authority has gone through the process of putting together the Policy DMH1 practice note. So that's something that went through the local plan steering group. And again, just to clarify, I think some of this is in the report, but that states that the size of affordable housing is controlled in line with the applicant's housing need. It also goes on to clarify for properties for individual people will continue to be subject to a maximum allowance of 39 square metres unless personal circumstances are put forward or for reasons of local character and we receive sufficient justification basically to justify a larger house, but that would be up to 58 square metres. So that's the approach and reasoning behind that recommendation. And I did just want to add one final point on that from a consistency point, is that approach at looking at principle is something that is applied with delegated planning decisions. I believe there have also been decisions through planning committee that have taken that principle approach, and also it's something that inspectors have applied at appeal as well. Just on to the second reason for refusal then, that relates to impact on the character and appearance of the conservation area. So as you saw in some of the photos, the site has agricultural open land to the south, and the site itself and that land is within the conservation area, and the Peak District, the Peak Forest Conservation Area Appraisal talks about the relationship between Peak Forest and agricultural land. So whilst the site itself has quite a close relationship with the property, in putting something there, you are interrupting the relationship between the agricultural land and that part of Peak Forest. So the harm that has been identified is less than substantial. We look at whether there is a public benefit that outweighs that harm. In this case, because of the concerns with the development in principle, the conclusion is that that harm is not outweighed. So that reflects the second recommended reason for refusal. Thank you.
Right, thank you very much. We have one speaker. It's Mr. Rookback again. Thank you. Well, you've done this before, so you know, turn it on and we'll listen to you. Thank you.
Good morning and thank you for the opportunity to speak again today. My name is Andrew Rook. I am one of the applicants. I have lived at 25 Hernstone Lane since 1983 and the application site forms part of our garden. The proposed dwelling is for our daughter Natalie, who is 26 years old, still lives at home and has lived in Peak Forest all of her life. Natalie is a teaching assistant at Hope Primary School and she is unable to take the time off work today. I'm aware the committee members here may not necessarily be the same as those who attended in December. Those who were present will remember that there was a detailed debate about the affordable housing policy and its failure to provide flexibility for changing circumstances of younger applicants. Committee members who were present in December will note that the plans of the proposed property is now exactly 97 square metres. The proposed property has been moved closer to Hernstone Lodge in response to a concern expressed about the impact on views of the open space in the conservation area. The driveway turning area has been reduced to soften the impact on the green space and a few more trees have been added. For us, this is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity as we only have one suitable piece of land. If we build a single-person dwelling to the size of 39 square metres and are restricted to the 10% limit on an extension, I can predict that it wouldn't be very long before Natalie would be stuck in the same position again of not being able to afford anything on the open market, and our chance to build a local need house that Natalie can grow into will be gone. It seems to me it is logical, practical and economic to allow a larger dwelling that complies with size limits in policy, but that will be more useful both for Natalie to grow into and larger families in need of affordable housing in the future. A 3-bedroom house can accommodate various different sized local need households, whereas a 1-person house will be restricted forever to accommodating 1 person only. I think it would be impossible to build a standalone 39 square metre house on the plot that will be in keeping with existing street view and the local area design. We would love Natalie to be able to live next door to us as we get older. It would be fantastic to think of her settling down in the village she has grown up in and raising a family there. Natalie also has friends and work colleagues who live in the village. We don't want Natalie to be financially forced from the village simply because she doesn't have children at this stage. The proposal itself is policy compliant and would be an asset to the village and the community, so I'd ask the committee to consider whether we can future-proof this application, giving Natalie and families in the future a local need family home in perpetuity. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Sorry. Are you all right if I just
if you wish to,
additional introduction, just to try and guide?
I've got you, Bill.
Thanks, Chair. Okay. So at the last committee, the Chair gave quite a detailed introduction himself, setting out his views on the issue of self-build and the policy relating to that. Several members themselves expressed a view of the need for flexibility. I tried to remind the members of the need to start with policy. So I just want to reiterate a couple of points in that and just try and guide where we go. We do have a policy basis in DHMH1, Hannah set out, that seeks a proven need and also states that any new houses should follow the size thresholds set out in the policy. So those requirements have to have some meaning. There is guidance in the plan on that, and we have a practice note, as we've said, setting out how to apply flexibility. So 39 as a starting point, look at circumstances, with scope up to 58, as we've said through that practice note. That note was considered and discussed by the local plan steering group, and it was agreed at the planning committee as our approach to considering the scope for flexibility, with our core view that housing need should address need. We are willing to hear the case from applicants regarding circumstances for larger houses, but that hadn't been offered in this case. Members, as we said, could also consider the physical nature of the site and consider what form of development would most effectively integrate with local form, character, scale, etc. In this case, we simply have an aspiration for a family-size home, and no one can really predict that future need. So an aspiration as opposed to the actual need. Housing authorities don't operate like that, so we would question why we should. There's a significant need for smaller properties across the area, and that's been evidenced by recent permissions in Bakewell and Yulgrave. We will be building 1 and 2 bedroom homes in those places. So I'd like to remember and remind members of the need to start from a development plan and that practice note, which was agreed by yourselves. And I appreciate Patrick as chair has a different opinion on this, but that is the agreed position of the authority, and we are going to look at the policy issues around that. The alternative is that members... Sorry, I'm just drying up. Some drink. Thanks. The alternative is that members in this case should explore whether there are material planning considerations to go contrary to the officer recommendation. You've heard some of that context from the applicant's father just now. There might be something in that. Members didn't do that last time, and that was a concern to me, so it's important to stress that point. Do you feel there are exceptional circumstances that would allow us to divert from policy and guidance and allow additional flexibility? If you don't do that, then our view is that we are running contrary to that policy and guidance, both in terms of the development plan and the practice note, and I have to consider whether we should refer that back to a future committee to consider the risk to policy, scope for challenge, etc., bearing in mind other approvals that have been made within that policy. At the last committee, I actually said I was minded not to do that because I couldn't see the value in repeating a report that we'd made before. So I've had a conversation with the authority's solicitor about that to see whether there would be scope to seek council opinion on the chairman's concerns about the application of policy, and whether we could build that into a referral paper just so we've got clarity on application, both for this case but obviously going forward with future cases. All we want is clarity, all of us, I think, on that, in terms of that, in advance of a new local plan policy, which could be anything up to 18 months away, although I do recognise that as new policies come in place, they accrue additional weight, but that's something we would have to balance against the starting point now. So, if members are minded to approve, I would seek to refer the item and look for that time to get more independent legal counsel. But my preference is that members explore the material considerations first. So please start there. Thank you.
Right, I've got 2 speakers so far. That's Bill Hanley.
Obviously fairly complicated in some ways, but simple in others. So the two issues as far as the location, just looking at the fact there's location. Peak Forest is a linear settlement, pretty well linear, so there's a few roads going off it. So if you were going to build there, and I don't think there's any doubt that it is suitable to infill, what would effectively be infilling along the Hernstone Lane is in fact the main road going through Peak Forest. So you would look to be infilling, and if you know Peak Forest, there are little gaps, and then there are houses, and then there are more houses, and there's a bit of a gap. So in a sort of spatial town planning sense, it would be an obvious location, given a suitable design, which to me it seems to be, and the location that physically that seems a perfect solution in order to provide more housing. And we are, I think, beyond doubt, there is a need for appropriate housing in our villages in the Peak District. There is a demand and there is a need. So that's the sort of physical side of things. So I'll put that aside. I hope that makes sense. Then there's a question about the actual size of that building and about local needs. There's a whole thing about affordable housing, and I'm on the local plan group, and I think we need to sort of at some point get to grips with this whole notion of affordable housing. What I'm more interested in here is local need. That is what is really at issue in the Peak Park at the moment, is that people who have grown up locally have somewhere to live realistically without going to the open market, and that is, you know, I live in Hathersage, and I know it's impossible for local young people to buy or move into or stay in the village. So I'm very acutely aware of that. I think the issue of and the other issue on that, so I would hope that we could meet local needs and that there would be conditions that ensure that that house remains for local needs, because I think what we don't want is people to build a local needs house and then on day 2, when it's finished, sell it as an open market house. I think that's what this policy is designed at, and we don't want that. So we need to condition that. I've heard the applicant, and I think there is a very good case for his daughter moving in there. And I think what we don't want to do as a planning committee or a planning authority is start to predetermine how big a family should be and how it should develop. We don't want to start saying, and I don't think that policy was ever designed to do that. It's sort of got a bit mixed up with affordable housing and needs of people renting, and the fact if you're renting a house, you can rent a house and then have a family and hopefully rent a bigger house, and then your family gets bigger and rent a bigger house. But if you're building a house, you in the expectation that your family unit, however that's comprised, and we don't need to determine, it could be friends, partners, family, children, whoever, older relatives. I don't think it's our position to determine at that point that doesn't happen, if you see what I mean. Things change, don't you? And I don't think that's our role in physical and spatial planning to make that sort of call. The house as it's designed would be flexible, and should the applicant's daughter ever move, there's a whole range of people could possibly move into there. It's big enough for that. It's not just of a limited size. So I don't think the role of the planning authority, I think the role of the planning authority in our committee is to meet the aspirations of applicants, providing they meet all the relevant conditions, particularly in view of visual impact and impact on the locality. And I would support this application, given what I've heard today, and I wasn't at the previous meeting, but I think there's a genuine local need there that if we condition it as a local needs house, would fit well into Peak Forest and would meet a genuine need. Thank you.
Right, I've got Ginny Priestley next.
Thank you, Chair. Without repeating what Bill's just said, it's a difficult one that we're presented with here for the self-build affordable house. And I think we need to be realistic about where it is, because realistically, Peak Forest, which needs affordable local housing to sustain what part of our point is to have thriving communities. And I think realistically, the local authority or local housing associations are not going to look at Peak Forest to be able to put local affordable housing in. So to have somebody come forward who is going to put their own money into building an affordable house, I think is to be applauded. The issue seems to be very much about the size. And we need to take into account somebody of 26, what their future aspirations are. So do we permit a one-bedroom house, and then when they get married, they look to have an increase in that house so that it accommodates two people, and then they expand their family? It's very, very difficult. You can't predict what the future is going to be. But I would suggest that it needs to be commercially viable for somebody to build an affordable house, which is very much secured as a local affordable house. And it will be a very disappointing design, a very poor street view, as already has been pointed out, if that building is then just has extensions applied to it. So I too support this.
Any other members? Melandra?
Hello. What I would like to know is sort of, are people being forced to build affordable? Because this exactly mirrors a situation that I and my husband were in about 15 years ago in Taddington. We had just married, we had parents-in-law next door, and there was a very small croft, but nevertheless big enough to build a house that would accommodate a family home. We were very young. We were definitely going to have a family. For us, it was a policy that kind of shot itself in the foot, and my personal opinion is that housing associations, etc., should be asked to build the affordable housing, but for local people with a real local need, if you ask them to build a house that's too small for their reasonable, predictable future need, you end up sending them out of that village or out of their local area. This is the end product. So a few years down the line, we had a boy and a girl. The house was very, very small. We could only have the 2 bedrooms in it. And the kitchen was very, very small. It was a kitchen diner, but you're all on top of each other, and the living room was probably the only room of decent size in that house. So there we are, 2 children, boy and a girl, and we were told that we couldn't increase the size of the house, first of all. Also, you're in a full nest situation. That time of your life, you're in a full nest situation. You don't have the disposable cash to start building extensions. You just don't, it's a fact. We did ask, we found out. Will we be able to build or not? We were told no, categorically you won't. This is an affordable home. So we were forced to put that home on the market, and we ended up moving into Buxton, which is some 5 miles away from where parents-in-law live. The children are now 14 and 16. Father-in-law's dying. We are struggling because parents-in-law, they've always been very upset to lose us. They've always needed our help, and it's a journey to travel to look after them. And we were pushed out of the village in which my husband is 8th generation Taddington. You know, I grew up in the Peak District myself, and he's 8th generation in his village. And this is what you end up with if you don't allow people to build a home that's the right size in the first place, whether it's affordable or not, if it's the right size for a family. And for that reason, I support the application for a decent sized home. Thank you.
Rachel, next. Yes.
Sorry, can I just come back on one point?
Sorry.
Go through the members, just for a voice on one point. Sorry, just to say, I'm not going to dispute your point, Sarah. Otherwise, other than importantly through policy, we have to define all of these houses as affordable houses. That's a national policy position for national parks. We operate through exceptions. We haven't got a housing target for market housing unless there's a real conservation driver. On greenfield sites, these have to be affordable houses. So that's a really important point. Now, I mean, there's questions about how you control that, and some of the tools we've got are around, someone mentioned conditions, but certainly 106 agreement would do that, or the size and the type. You know, the kind of modest homes stay more affordable, and the, you know, obviously rent or shared ownership in other cases. This is another route. This is another route. Self-build is an acceptable route, but we have to define it as affordable housing. It's really important, because otherwise there would be a huge demand for market homes in a national park. So there is a really important definition point there. Thanks.
So can I say in this case, I would consider it to be exceptional circumstances, because you do have your parents next door, and you need to, and for the reasons of community cohesion, keeping children in the village and looking after your parents going forward. You know, that's been a big difficulty for us, and for the years that we've spent. We've been 5 years in Buxton, which we love, by the way. But it is difficult. It has been difficult being moved out of our... We've adapted, but it was hard.
Okay, I've got Rachel Bennett next.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I was just going to pick up on just bringing us back to policy and using that to make judgments on applications. Also, I just wanted to pick up, I wasn't able to attend the December meeting, and at that, the applicant was asked to reduce the size of the dwelling to 97 square metres and has now done so, and it's now coming back. So I because I wasn't there, I don't know the conversation that happened, but would that have not been the appropriate time to bring it to a recommendation, so that they're not coming back time and time again with iterations of the size? Because the deferral was reduce it to 97, and it sounds like that was discussed and agreed within the policy exemptions, or circumstances and exemptions, but now is being asked for something slightly different. So yeah, just would like to understand that a bit better.
Well, I can explain this to this extent. There was a robust debate on the application at the last meeting, But one thing was certain, which was that we couldn't approve it because it was over 97 square metres. So that's why it's come back to us. I think you make a fair point about we can't keep the applicant coming back to us on these with this application, but that's an issue we've got to think about.
Sorry, just the additional to that is that members proposed the reduction to 97. Officers disagreed with that and said actually that wouldn't be applying the terms of the policy. So that was the decision of the members to come back. There's a dispute about how that fits with the policy.
And that's obviously the local plan work is happening, isn't it, at the moment? And should, you know, these debates should be considered as part of that local plan work.
Right, I've got Mike Chaplin next. And Ken Smith.
I promised myself I wasn't going to speak again on this matter. I would say firstly that I think a one-bedroom property for one person would look incongruous in the streetscape, given the other homes that we saw when we did the. Wasn't really a site visit, it was more a drive-by site visit, I seem to remember, which perhaps we should have spent a bit more time there. And I do think that makes the 35 square metre property not acceptable. But that is not what's on the table. I really do think it has to be a larger property so that it will sit right with all the other homes along Hermstone Lane. And the second point I'd make is that this policy, this HC1, it's a one-size-fits-all. It will do for the people that want granny flats, or granddad flats, I should also say. You know, if you're in your 60s and 70s and wanting to scale down. And it's the same policy for 20-somethings like this young woman who is hoping to continue in the village and with a family, and you've provided an excellent illustration of that, Melandra, earlier. So that's why it's making it so difficult for us.
Bill?
Yeah, I understand. I have a lot of sympathy for that. We don't want to just have policies and then just trash them, and I don't think we're doing that. I think we've heard a compelling case. Yeah, there shouldn't be a one-size-fits-all policy, and I don't think when the policy was originally developed or evolved, I don't know the history, but I imagine it was a little bit more nuanced than we can see here. I don't think it was ever the intention to refuse an application for a local person who'd grown up, lived in the village for 26 years, who were next to their parents, who had a local need, who were probably going to have to expand their family unit imminently, to refuse that. I don't think that was ever the intention of the policy, and I think we can take those special considerations into account. So we're not breaching the policy, and I also understand that there needs to be a maximum size, because what we don't want, and I understand, I think that's why that policy evolves, is we don't want people building mansions everywhere, you know, if it's a free-for-all. So there is a size limit, and that is appropriate, and we're within that size limit now. So can I move to? Is that a point to do it, unless anyone wants to say anything else?
If you wish, before you finish speaking, you're welcome to propose something, and then we'll see where it gets to.
Approve this, given that I think this is a particularly special case with the special circumstances that I've heard today. It will fit into Peak Forest. Mike's point is very well made. My colleague's point is very well made about family needs and local needs. Your point's very well made about having a smaller dwelling will look a bit odd. And then Ginny's point about, yeah, you're going to add extensions. It's going to be quite a nice building with bits added on every so often at a time when people can't afford to do it as well. So, you know, let's grasp the opportunity, meet a local need of something that fits in. So I move to approve this application given those special circumstances.
Right, I've got Ken Smith next.
Thank you, Chair. I think I made my views clear at the December meeting. I think which instigated the robust debate. I will repeat some of them because I don't agree with the comments that Bill has just made. I don't see this as a special case at all. We have a responsibility as a National Park Authority and as members of that National Park Authority to manage development across the National Park in order to meet our statutory purposes to conserve and enhance the landscapes, as well as looking after, as far as we can, our communities. Our policies, which have been approved by members, have been approved by government, are as they are. They are there to provide us with the tools to do just that, to manage development. That means, frankly, members, that we aren't going to be able to please all people all the time. There are going to be some winners and there are going to be some losers. That's the nature, I'm afraid, of the responsibilities we bear in applying policies. Now, it's been described as a special case. I don't see any evidence of it being a special case. We have a single person who is asking for a 3-bedroom house to be built. That's completely over the top. The experience we've had in where we have had appeals against refusals in similar circumstances, single people wanting large properties, those have been, in the main, they've been refused at appeal, and the inspectors have consistently made the case, as we heard earlier, have consistently made the case that we have to make decisions on the basis of current needs and how they've been estimated, how they've been arrived at. There is not a demonstrable current need for a 3-bedroom house in this person's personal circumstances. So I don't see, therefore, that there is a special case. There is no family, personal family, apart from the potential of looking after ageing parents. There's no personal need for a dwelling of that size. And that's why, when you combine that with the application of policy, we are where we are with the refusal. I have sympathy with the needs. I have sympathy with the views of members. But I don't think this is the right way forward. I don't see positive material reasons for refusing this application. I don't agree with the applicant that this is policy compliant. I think there has been sufficient evidence provided to show that it's actually completely against policy. So I don't see that there's a compelling case for this. And I think the officer recommendation is entirely appropriate. I would take issue as well with Bill's earlier comment about the main road being the principal area of development. That road has only been there as a result of the construction of the turnpike from Sheffield to Sparrowpit from 1759. The focus of settlement in Peak Forest has been to the north, and that's why you've got the majority of settlement along Hernston Lane on the north side of that road, and that's why the gaps on the southern side are so important. I rest my case, Chair.
Thank you very much. Lee?
I think I'm going to be in agreement with Ken on this. Actually, we've got to stick to policy. We have these policies for a reason. And while we're sympathetic towards people who need local need, we've also got to remember these policies were written for a reason. And this is a conservation area. And our role is to protect these areas. So I unfortunately, I can't support this. And I will go with officer recommendation.
Thank you. I wonder whether, Bill, before you come back in again, you would allow me to make my contribution.
No, I'll just make a slightly different. One of the reasons we're talking about there, if it was a level playing field, if it wasn't for the fact there's high house prices, if it was, if that, take all that away, and if you could just go and buy a house or rent a house or whatever, then a single person could buy a mansion or a 3-bedroomed house. So we wouldn't be interfering, would we? We wouldn't be saying you can't do that, regardless of housing need or whatever. And the reason we're here is because the housing situation in this country is a crisis, and what we're trying, these policies are trying to try and redress that in some way, and we can help in some small way by allowing this application. That's at the base of it. It's not. We shouldn't be judging what sort of houses people live in. Traditionally, this country where the houses were cheaper, people moved into houses, brought up families in the house, and then they live in it as an older person. But it's because of the critical housing situation. So I think by approving this, we can somehow, in a very, very small way, address it.
Right. I'm going to make my contribution now. I'll leave aside the merits just for the moment and talk about policy. From around about the year 2000, we've had this policy limiting the size of houses. The document I've seen is dated 2003. And that is the early version of DMH1. And that sets smaller size limits, but it sets size limits for houses that can be built. And it is expressed in these terms. Brian, you've had yours.
No, I'm just going to, just as a point of fact, that the 2003 document was the SPG.
Yes, I'm going to say yes. I'm going to say that. Just to make the point, it was a policy document called an SDP, not part of the plan, but it was a policy document. And that document sets out the house sizes. It does not have anything in it which says people can only build a house to the size of their immediate needs. What it says is, if you're going to build a 4-bedroom house, it can only be so big. If you're going to build a 3-bedroom house, it can only be so big, and so down the scale. That document remained in being until 2019. Certainly from the point when the core strategy was introduced, which I think was 2012, I think it was approved in 2011 and came into effect just before I joined in 2012, but whatever, it's round about that time. We've had numerous applications, well, numerous, we've had about 25 applications for affordable houses. And at no stage was it ever suggested during that period that the only people who could occupy the only size of house you could have was one to meet your immediate needs. And frequently, we built houses to the full size. They were occupied by a young man or a young couple or whatever. Families grew and they filled the house and the space available. But the policy in that SDP was interpreted the way round that I have said. It was not limited to the size of household that wanted to occupy the building. In 2019, the development management policies were introduced, which produced DMH1. Policy DMH1 is expressed in very similar terms to the original SDP. There is no wording in the policy as it's drafted which says that the size of the building is limited to the immediate need of the household. It is the other way around. If you're building a 4-bedroomed house, it has to be 97 square metres and so on. And that is the policy which appears in the DMP. The notion that it should be limited solely to the immediate needs is something that has come in later on. And we were told round about 2020 that the policy had changed, and now in future you would only need to be able to build to the size of your immediate needs. Questions were asked about where that change took place. A report was made to the Planning Committee in April 2021 purporting to explain how that change took place. And it was justified on the basis of the paragraph 6.48 that Hannah's just referred to. But unfortunately, that paragraph, which is not quoted in this report, incidentally, it comes from outside the report, which talks about controlling housing in line with the future need, actually only relates to what happens when one of these houses has been built and it's being sold on. It does not say it has to be limited to the immediate need. The policy document that was the so-called administrative note that was approved in February 2022 also relies on paragraph 6.48. And that is the point at which a formal arrangement was made to reverse the policy. In future, we would limit it to the immediate needs of the occupant. Now, that is a reversal of policy. A policy which says you can only build up to that size if you're building a four-bedroomed house is not the same policy as one which says you can only build a 37 square metres house if there's one of you. That is a change of policy. What I tried to achieve in 2020, 21, 22 was an explanation as to where and how that change of policy took place. I have yet to receive it. And it's interesting that in this report, we actually have the quote set out against policy DMH1, it's on page 53, which says this is what the policy says. But actually, I have yet to see in the policy documents we have, the policy documents are our core strategy and our DMP document. I have yet to see a clear explanation anywhere as to how that policy got turned on its head. And that is the point of difference between me and the officers. Now, at the best you could say is that the outcome is uncertain. It may be, he may be right, I may be right. But I would have expected a policy as onerous as one which says you can only build up to that size to be explicitly stated in the statutory documents which have gone through public consultation, a process of examination in public and of government approval. I would have expected such a policy to be explicitly and clearly stated. And it is not explicitly and clearly stated. And if it had been, we would have had something here saying, this document says X, and it would have written out the words to make it absolutely clear what the policy was. Now, as far as I'm concerned, the issue here for members is there something in our statutory policy documents, the ones that we are asked to have regard to when we're determining application, is there something here that clearly states that we can only build to the immediate needs? If there is something that says that, then obviously the advice you're getting is correct. If there is nothing that says that, the best that can be said is it's doubtful, and the worst that can be said is actually there was no change from the original policy. Now, I've tried to put that as clearly as I can, but that is the concern that I'm having. And I would just add that we've only had 2 of these applications since the February 2022 report. Both of them we were advised to refuse. Both of them we actually approved to the size applied for. The last one being at Tissington, when we had actually we had an excellent presentation from Councillor Maelstrom, who came and spoke on the Tissington one, and who explained the sort of arguments that Bill was trying to put together. And the Tissington one was approved unanimously. And it wasn't referred back, and it wasn't put to anybody else. It went on and went its way. Now, it really is up to members to decide which way they want to go on this. For me, my personal view is that there has never been a change of policy from what has been going on since I joined the authority in 2020. I'm still waiting for a clear explanation as to how that policy has changed. And for me, this is not contrary to policy. It is actually in accordance with policy. That's my personal view. Brian will now contradict me, which is fine. But in the process of doing that, I would really ask for him to point to the words on paper that tell us what this policy is.
So to some degree, I think this is why I'm suggesting council opinion, because there is a difference of view in how it's strictly worded and how it's applied. We have got a different view on that. The main thing to come back on is that the policy that we referred to was in the 2001 local plan. The policy equivalent, if you like, of DMH1 at that time didn't include the housing sizes in them. So it was an expression of responding to need. What the 2019 document did was explicitly put those sizes into the policy. So there was a difference, a real big point of difference on the adoption of that 2019 document. In the meantime, Patrick's absolutely right that we had a supplementary planning document that tried to explain our approach. So the key difference for us is firstly the introduction of those floor space guidelines linked to need in that DMH1 policy. And there's a lot of contextual change to the documents as well. So from 2001 to 2019, we referred to various paragraphs in the reports we brought back to you, and Hannah's referred to some as well, that explain the way that we will now work much more closely with the housing authorities through things like home options to understand what housing need actually is. Because otherwise we're dependent on these kind of debates, and it's actually, we're not specialists on that sometimes. Actually, if you're looking at what someone's actual housing need is, they're the people you would look for, and they would kind of allocate out the kind of houses that they need. In other national parks, these equivalent policies actually refer to the bands, the council housing bands. So they have similar approaches that actually refer to that. We are looking at what other parks are doing, and we are looking to see if there are a different strand of policy that we can really separate out. So taking kind of Melandra's point, that actually sometimes there is a more a local need or a self-build impetus to do that could still be under the affordable housing route, and actually the strategic approach to responding to needs could be done through the RSL development. We're quite clear at the minute. Our policies say we'll apply the same approach and we get the same inputs on individuals. This particular applicant has got a home options report that says their need is for a single person dwelling.
Right. That's where we are now. Has any member got anything further to contribute to the debate, or does any member wish to propose anything? And we'll see where we get to from here. Oh, Bill has proposed it. You're quite right. Is anybody going to second Bill's proposal? Thank you, Melandra. That's at least something to get the discussion going. And you're moving that this be approved. If it is approved, we need to know what the conditions might be and what the circumstances would be, and then we'll come back to what Brian's going to tell us shortly.
Yep, so if it were approved, it would need to be subject to a Section 106 agreement to control the occupancy and the size of the dwelling. It would also be subject to conditions, so I've got some draft conditions here. Statutory time limit, accordance with the approved plans, restrict permitted development rights for the site, condition for the stonework of the building, and we'd be looking for a sample panel and a sample for the roofing detail as well. Details of windows and doors prior to their installation, the design of the roof edge of the dwelling, a condition on rainwater goods, on pipe work, service lines to be underground, a control on external lighting, submission of details for solar panels and air source heat pump, a scheme of hard and soft landscaping to be submitted, including details for the replacement of the 2 ash trees on the site, and a condition that the dwelling shall not be occupied until the foul and surface water drainage measures are installed and permanently maintained thereafter.
Thank you very much. Are you proposing it on that basis? And then Melandra, are you happy with that as seconder? Right. Has any member got an amendment or suggestion on those conditions? In that case, I'm going to provisionally put it to the vote. Well, I'm going to put it to the vote because then we can talk about where we go next. All those in favour of approving this application on those conditions, and it's obviously subject to the Section 106 agreement. Should that become should we get that far? All those in favour? 6, 7, 8, 9. Those against? 1, 2, 3. Anybody abstaining? 1, 2. Right. So far, that is carried. Now, what Brian, I suspect, is about to ask you is what is the reason that you're using to support that, the planning reason you're to support your resolution. And that's what we need to articulate. Now, your point is, Bill, can you just remind us?
That's a difficult one. I've put my wig on now. It's illegal. Yeah, we'll go on then.
That a one-bedroom property would look incongruous in the landscape. So this would sit better on that road.
Well, I think what I've heard today, and I wasn't at the previous meeting, is that it's clearly someone who has local connections. It's meeting a local need which would not be met in any other way by any other housing survey or housing association. It is clearly going to be a family house, and although I don't think it's a role of the planning authority to predetermine people's family composition or future family things, it's a very prudent and future-looking policy to see a young woman moving into a house with the potential to expand their family in a place they have lived all their life. And I also don't think that the policy on restrictive sizes was ever meant to exclude this possibility. I can't believe people sat down and made that policy and thought, oh, if that happens, that's good, we can stop that happening. I'm going to put it in really basic terms. Did anyone ever stop and say that? I don't think so. I know that looking ahead at the local plan, that we will be looking at this very closely to prevent sort of anomalies happening in the future. I mean, is that something?
Yeah, can I suggest another reason, actually, which is that if we really are in a situation that there is such a lack of understanding of what our policy is, that we need to go to council to actually understand what the policy is, and that having approved, for example, the Tissington application, that we should for the moment give the benefit of doubt to the applicant and sort our own affairs out at a later stage. Because really, the applicant needs a decision. We can't keep going on, and I think it was Rachel's point. We can't keep going on and on on with this. The policy position is far from clear. Would be another reasonable, and we give the benefit of the doubt.
Chair, I can understand why you're coming at it from that, or that you are coming at it from that perspective, but it seems to me that isn't the case. What we're seeking is clarification on the, let's call them, two sets of interpretations of documentation as they exist. It's not a case of sorting out what we understand by our policy. It's sorting out which is the correct interpretation, I would suggest.
Well, actually, I think it's deeper than that. Where is the policy written down is the first question.
I mean, from my perspective, as I said, the fact that planning inspectors, in the main, at appeal, support the interpretation.
Yes, these things were not argued by planning inspectors.
Yeah. No, that's as maybe, but they take our policies and work to our policies.
Right. Okay. Well, you've heard the reasons. What are you now saying you want to do?
Okay. So I looked at the reasons that you've given. I've looked at the level of the vote. I think if it had been a much closer vote, I would have probably referred that. I think I've got 3 areas. One is about street scene. One is about the concern that there isn't other provision from the housing authorities, and actually there's just a lack of provision generally in that, particularly in the High Peak area, I think. And there's a kind of question about future proofing, which also responds to me. So I will accept that as material considerations.
Is that our Christmas present?
That's your Christmas present. No, I mean, I need to look at these carefully. Separately, as you've said, I think I'd still like to go and take the council advice, but it won't be triggered by this. But I think these are monitoring cases. These tell us things about the application of policy that we can feed in. It's still important because we've still got a year or so to apply this. I would still like that clarity and report that back to you. I think there are, when the chair has said we haven't given clarity, I have given 2 and 3 emails trying to do that, so I have got a position on that. But I think we'll need to tease out what those questions are about the policy and feed that in and get some useful legal context back. But I will accept that on this case as material.
So for the benefit of the applicant who's sitting at the back of the room wondering what on earth is going on, your application has been approved, subject to a Section 106 agreement and so on. And your agents and solicitors will be dealing with ours at some point in the near future. Okay, thank you for your attendance.
Can I just make a point? Just very brief. I think we are achieving what we need to achieve in the park. We're meeting. There's a desperate need to respond to local needs in terms of housing, and also in terms of the visual. I feel passionately as well about the visual look of the park. So I don't think we're affecting that either. I think we're meeting both those.
I recognise.
Okay, right. Thank you very much. We need to move on to the next item on the agenda, which is Castleton Visitor Centre. Hold on. Can we put off? Yes, we've got rather behind. What's the next one? Can we deal with the Yulegrave one next? Because I think we ought to allow the customers before our own people. Thank you for that.
That's right.
Right.
Oh, of course.
Right.
Was it after that one then? After this. There we go. There you go. You can flick from there. Okay. Yeah, just do side to side.
As quickly as you can.
Both, I think, probably. Can you use a laser pointer on that as well? No. Just use it. So that'll click forward as well. Okay.
Okay. Right. Order, as the man says. John.
Yes. Okay. Thank you, Chair. Okay. So this application seeks planning permission for a single-storey extension to a converted barn known as Sweetbriar Cottage in Yulegrave. The application was heard at November Planning Committee, where it was deferred to allow consideration of a revised proposal. The application returns to the Planning Committee as officer recommendation remains one of refusal. Okay, so on the screen we can see the location plan. So marked in red is the site, the barn obviously there, the garden area to the rear. The access is from Congsbury Lane here. To the south is a former farmhouse. That's just here. And to the southwest are 3 two-storey converted barns. That's here. Together, these buildings make up the historic former farmstead. These former barns, along with the building we're discussing, were converted within their original shell following the grant of planning approval in 1999. Okay. Sorry. Yeah, that's fine. So here we can see the block plan. So the top left is existing, and the bottom right is where the extension will be sited here. This is the existing floor plan. You can see it's simple rectangular form. And then again, it's pretty self-explanatory. Really, to the top end, top left is the single-storey extension that will provide a dining area. This is the floor plan that was discussed at November committee, just to be clear. It'll become more clear on the other plans, but here you can see the glazed link, which has now been removed, but the elevation plans will show that more clearly. And now this is what's proposed for the floor plan. So the footprint remains the same. Now if we move to the existing elevations, you can see the rear elevation, which is really what we're primarily looking at today, with the 2 simple slit windows at the centre. Next slide shows the proposed elevations from November committee with the extension as was then proposed. So you had the single, the glazed element here, the glazed link, then stem up to a pitched roof element with glazing to the west elevation and extensive glazing also to the north elevation. Now we see the amended scheme, which is put forward for consideration today. The glazed link has been removed. Double doors are now proposed to the west and north elevations, so here and here. A slit window will be added to the east elevation here. As stated, the footprint remains the same, and this has resulted in the pitch of the roof increasing by approximately 0.3 metres, so it's slightly higher now. So move on to the photographs. This photograph is taken on the approach to the eastern end of the building. The neighbouring converted barns are to the left of the shot. Congsbury Lane will be behind us at this point. This is the photo of the front elevation. This elevation will be unchanged, but the photo further illustrates the context of the site and the fact that it's retained its historic agricultural character. This is the view from the garden area of the dwelling to the west. So the extension will be located just to this end here. And this is a closer view of the end of the barn. So the extension would be here. And it would reach just short of the narrow window opening here. You can see. There's a final photograph to show this is the western gable of the barn. The extension coming off, projecting off here. The roof extending from the eaves up to a total pitched height of approximately 3.9 metres. So I appreciate this has already been a committee. I'll just briefly summarise the office opinion recommendation. I would start by making clear that the authorities' conversion of historic buildings, SPD, does advise that schemes for barn conversions should work within the shell of the existing building, avoiding additions or extensions. This barn, as well as the other barns within the former farmstead, were converted to a high standards in their original shell. However, the extension now proposed, we consider would undermine the historic linear form of the barn and introduce an awkward, contrived form, disrupting the simple re-elevation. The extension would further disrupt the L-shaped layout of the former farmstead, which is a key characteristic of the site, which is stated in the report, falls within a Eurograde conservation area. And again, as stated, the layout, as a layout that was retained as part of the 1999 approval. In addition, the double doors now proposed would not reflect the existing size or design of the modest openings of the barn. Overall, it's considered the extension would harm the non-designated heritage asset itself, which we consider the barn is, and the setting of the conservation area. The application is therefore again recommended for refusal. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. We've got one speaker. Joe, you know the rules?
Are we on? I think so. Thank you. After the November planning meeting, we took away great hope from your debate and your conclusions that an extension of some sort could be acceptable to this dwelling, with the Chair making it clear that you could only defer the application if you considered an extension to this property was acceptable in principle. We went back to the drawing board and discussed alternatives with our clients, but also considered options put forward by yourselves as to a solution. We created 4 new schemes after discussion with our client. The first scheme was the one we introduced at the last meeting that the planning officer had not considered. The second scheme was for a flat roof extension hidden behind a high garden wall. The extension would not be seen for the wall. The next scheme was a pitch roof at right angles to the main dwelling. Again, this would be concealed behind the high garden wall with only the roof showing above. The fourth scheme is a pitch roof running parallel to the existing main dwelling, similar to the last submitted scheme, but with the flat roof link removed and reduced glazed openings. These schemes were sent to the planning officer for comment and negotiation. Disappointingly, there was little discussion and no meetings. Just confirmation that drawing number 12 was in front of you was the better option, as it was the most simple, with reduced glazing and the flat roof link removed. The planning officer was adamant that no extension should be allowed, contrary to the motion passed at the last committee. With this negative response, we carried out 2 amendments to this scheme and eventually came up with the scheme in front of you today, drawing 12B. The second derivative, with glazing reduced to provide more solid to void ratio, but with a small slot window in the gable end at the size and height of the existing adjacent slot windows in the north elevation. This extension is not in the open countryside. It is surrounded by houses existing and newly approved. It is also 50 metres away from any vantage point on the road, on the footpath on the road. We ask you to stand by your previous comments and approve this application. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Right. Can I just get one thing clear? You mentioned something about the window arrangements. Now we've got this open on the screen. What are we talking about there again?
We're talking about the double doors on the west and north elevation.
On both elevations?
Yes. I mean, as you can see there, we consider those are much larger and different to what you can see on the front and on the rear.
So you're objecting to both of those? So there are 2 issues. One of them is whether there's an extension at all, and the second one is the fenestration.
Yes.
Okay. Right. Bill, you pushed this one when it was last time. Do you want to start? We won't make any comment about that at all.
I'm just looking at, I think, again, it's about, I think I do understand about the sort of, very much about keeping the historic fabric and the way things look. But I also think about there are reasonable aspirations of applicants, and there's also making buildings which are quite old suitable for more modern use as well, in terms of either size or design. And I think this is certainly a big improvement on the proposal that before us before. If you look at the site plan that came with your papers, it's very clear that all the buildings around about, particularly to the south, are all different little shapes, and that is part of the character of conservation areas of our villages, that buildings are different shapes and have been added to over the years or have been amended and developed and so forth. So the fact that there is an extension on a linear building shouldn't be exceptional, really, is my view on that. And and the way it looks in that landscape is I would guess acceptable, particularly given the materials used in this amendment.
Right. Other members? Ken?
Thank you, Chair. I think we have to remember what it is that we're dealing with, what has been done to it to date, and why what has been done to it to date is the way it is, and balance that against what is being proposed. The purpose of our policies for conserving buildings like this is to maintain those former agricultural buildings in the landscape. That's why there is the L shape, the shorter east-west single-storey building and the longer north-south two-storey set of buildings. They've all been converted to dwellings in order to conserve those particular buildings in the Yulgrave landscape. The purpose of our conversions SPD, the reason why it says avoiding additions or extensions to buildings like this, is for precisely the reason that they were approved for conversion, which is to retain them in the landscape in a form that reflects their previous use, and people purchasing those buildings have to be aware that that's the case. That's why the conversion has been approved, but it comes with it restrictions on future use. In the report that came to November meeting, my recollection is that the reason for the proposed extension was to be able to accommodate more easily family visits. It wasn't because of extending a family. It wasn't for any other reason than convenience. And I think what we've got to balance is that convenience against the impact on that building, regardless of the structures that surround it or that will surround it in future. That's why this is being recommended for refusal, because I agree with the officer assessment that what's being proposed is not appropriate on that north side of that building. First off, it punches a significant hole through the fabric of the building in order to provide access into the proposed extension. And then it's an incongruous addition. It's quite a substantial addition, the pitch roof on against the existing single-storey roof. The fenestration is completely at odds with what exists on the south-facing profile and is introducing fenestration into the north-facing elevation where there's currently only two breather slots that have been glazed for domestic comfort. So I really don't see, I can't support the proposal, and I would certainly support the officer recommendation, Chair.
Right, thank you. Ginny?
Yeah, I think looking at this, it's a lovely historic building, but we are looking at it, we're taking the historic value at a point in time. And all these old buildings were there for a purpose. They were originally farm buildings, which would have been altered over time for the convenience and purpose of the farming business. or whatever other business was being done in them. So I think to take it as a point in time that we are looking at it as a heritage asset is not really very helpful for the future, because yes, it's a lovely old building, but why should it stay like this? Why should it not be have some innovation put in to make it a better living accommodation, which is what it is now? So I can understand where the officers are coming from, you know, and I have sympathy for the way they're actually viewing it. But to me, this actually enhances the living accommodation, which is what we're looking at the moment.
Thank you. Any other members wish to make a contribution? Has anybody got a proposal to make? Is that seconded? That's it. You seconded it. All those in favour of refusing it? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. All those in favour of approving it? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I'm going to vote against approving it, but I'm now going to move from the chair that it be approved on the basis that the fenestration, officers go away and sort out the fenestration, because it's the principle of the extension I personally don't have a problem with. I do agree with the officers in terms of the windows and the fenestration, and I'm sure those can be improved. And if the officers can't make any agreement on that, it'll have to come back to us again. But I'm sure that an improvement could be effective. So I'm moving that from the chair. Is anybody prepared to second it? Okay. All those in favour of what I've just suggested? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. All those against? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, well I will now, well I've voted in favour of it, so that is carried, and it'll come back to us if you can't reach any agreement on the fenestration. Okay? Right, can we move on next to Castleton? Before we go any further, we have a choice of stopping for a quarter of an hour or trying to get this agenda finished by 1:30. Are you happy to go beyond 1 o'clock? Yeah?
I'm going to request a comfort break then.
Okay, so if we stop now for 5 minutes and try and get finished by 1:30. Okay, reconvening at about 3 minutes to 1. For the avoidance of doubt, all those in favour of going beyond 1 o'clock? Anyone against? That is carried. And we are on to the next item on the agenda, which is the Castleton Visitor Centre, agenda item 8. And Hannah?
Yeah, thank you. So this is the application at Castleton Visitor Centre in Castleton. Just a quick apology because I'm aware that the address isn't stated on the committee report. Just before I run through the application and what is being proposed, I just wanted to update members that following the completion of the committee report, the consultation period has finished and no representations were received as part of that process. We have received some updated information from the applicant. So we've received a written scheme of investigation in relation to archaeology. The authority's archaeologist has reviewed and accepted that report. So we've had further comments from her. And we have also had a response from Historic England who have confirmed they've got no objection to the application. Onto the application then. So it is for a new entrance porch, change of use of the museum space to Class E, replacement hard standing and installation of 2 roof lights. You've got the site location on the screen in front of you. So this is the visitor centre, just north of the main road through Castleton. The site is adjacent to a watercourse that you see just here, and there's another one to the east, and the site is in flood zones 2 and 3. The nearest neighbouring property is Orchard House to the west, and there are further properties to the south and a number of commercial properties in the area as well. The site is within Castleton Conservation Area, and you've got the Town Defences Scheduled Monument to the east just here. The nearest listed building is a Grade 2 listed building here. I think it's the Castle Hotel. Just change the slide. So these are the existing floor plans that you've got inside the centre. So you've got the visitor centre area here. This is the museum space, and there's a cafe in this part of the building, and there's storage space at the first floor. As it stands, this is the main entrance into the centre, so that's on the east elevation. These are the proposed floor plans. So the cafe is remaining, as is the visitor centre area. This is the entrance, so what is there will remain in situ, but that entrance won't be used anymore. It's proposed to have a new entrance into the building on the south elevation, which you see in the form of this extension here. As well as that, the museum area would change to a new Class E use. So that use is open until an occupier has been identified for that area, but the purple edge, which you can hopefully see on the screen, shows their demise. If you go on to the next slide, just here, you can see that an area would be retained by the Historical Society, so that will be for them to continue to have a display in the centre. The nature of that display will be with agreement with the authority. These are the existing elevations. So you've got the south elevation here. This is the glazed window on the south elevation, which you'll see on the next slide is the proposed location for the extension. And this is the existing main entrance into the building. The proposed south elevation shows the glazed extension. It is quite a contemporary design, but the width of it is fitted to the glazed opening behind. It would have aluminium framing, so the material and the colour would match the framing of the existing window behind it, and it's got a green roof. You can see the entrance doors are just on the side, so they're on a bit of an angle. The east elevation shows that the existing entrance would remain, but it just won't be in use anymore. This is the side profile of the elevation, and then you can also see that some roof lights are being introduced onto this lean-to, so that's the area where the Class E use is going to go. I just want to clarify that notwithstanding the roof lights that are shown on that elevation, we have agreed with the applicant a smaller size of roof lights, so they've submitted the manufacturer details of what they would like to provide, and we can control that by condition. The final element of the proposal is the replacement of the hard surfacing, so that would be like for like in terms of colour and appearance to match what is there as closely as possible. You've got a few photos, so this is the south elevation, and that area of glazing is where the entrance extension will go. That's the area of hard standing, which is to be replaced, and you can also see where the lean-to is, so that's where the Class E use will go, and the roof lights. And you're looking back towards the main road through Castleton there. That's the existing entrance into the building. That shows the west elevation of the building, and then that's just showing you the watercourse that sits on the other side of that west elevation. The application is recommended for approval. In terms of the proposed use, whilst we appreciate that the museum space does serve a valuable purpose, it's recognised that the reorganisation within the building is necessary to support the continued services in the visitor centre, and also to continue to provide an area for the Historical Society as well. So we do consider that element of the scheme to be acceptable. The increase of Class E use in the building is also considered to be acceptable within the centre of Castleton. So uses such as retail, offices, those kind of uses that fall within Class E are acceptable in centres like Castleton. The design of the extension is considered to be acceptable. It is considered to respond to the size of the existing opening, which it sits against, and the framing detail also responds to the existing window framing. In terms of all of the matters, the development has been found to be acceptable in terms of flood risk, subject to various mitigation measures. It is also acceptable in regard to archaeology, provided that the development is carried out in accordance with a written scheme of investigation. And whilst we do know comments received by the Highways Authority, officers are comfortable that the development would be acceptable in terms of highways and car parking, and also acceptable in all other respects. So the application is recommended for approval. Thank you. Oh, I did just want... Sorry, go on.
Chair's just asked if you could go back to the south elevation.
Only when the discussion starts, right? You finish your presentation.
Yeah, just before I go to that, I just wanted to update you of a few proposed condition changes. So condition 3 is proposed to be amended so that we receive details of refuse storage before the Class E comes into use. Condition 7 would be amended because we've received a written scheme of investigation, so it would be compliance with that document. And there would be 2 other conditions. One would be just for the opening hours of the Class E use to be consistent with the centre, and for compliance with the FRA and the mitigation measures in that report. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much. I'm hoping this is straightforward. Hello, Ken.
Move the recommendation, Chair, with those amendments.
I'm glad you've done that. Seconded. Have any members got any comments to make on this application? In that case, I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour of approving it? Anyone against? That is carried. Thank you. And the next one we have is the Tissington car park. You need stage directions for this, don't you?
Thanks, Chair. Okay, so this application seeks planning permission for the resurfacing of the existing of an existing car park with a macadam finish, installation of new drainage channels, and installation of new bollards and curbs between the car park and the trail at Tissington. The application is recommended for approval. There is one update to report. Following further discussion between officers and the applicant, it is now considered reasonable to remove condition 3, which is found on page 84 of your report pack, which requires the surfacing material to be permeable and details of that to be submitted to the authority. The applicant has confirmed that though the existing surface of the car park is unsealed, it is in reality so compacted to have little permeability. The sealed tarmac surfacing that is now proposed, when combined with the regrading of the site and the installation of the new drainage channels, will be sufficient to improve the drainage capacity at the site. Therefore, it's considered that condition would be unnecessary. In addition, the use of a permeable material would require a greater degree of excavation due to the compaction, which would in turn lead to an increase in time required to deliver the scheme, as well as greater cost. It is important to note that consultees made comments on this application on the basis that minimal excavation will be undertaken. In order to ensure drainage from the site will be effectively managed, the following condition will be instead added. So, which is, prior to any works commencing, a surface water drainage strategy shall be submitted to and agreed in writing by the National Park Authority. Once approved, the work shall be carried out in full accordance with the approved details/specifications. That's the one update. So I'll move on now to the slides. The first slide is the location plan, which shows The site marked in red, which is with a central part of the Tiston Trail. The car park is located south of the village on what was historically part of the railway station's platforms. The site is approximately 20 metres to the north at high level. Sits a terrace of 4 cottages, known as station cottages, and across, again at a high level, 3 cottages known as Darfield cottages, which are grade 2 listed. A detached building housing toilets and a small refreshment shop sits at the westernmost edge of the car park, which is here. Access to the car park descends directly from Darfield Lane, so down here. The whole site itself lies outside of the village conservation area. So this is the proposal. We'll see the resurfacing of the existing car park with tarmac. The car parking spaces will be marked with white lines, and this would help to increase capacity to 37 formal spaces, 5 informal / large vehicle spaces, and 2 accessible spaces. You can see here. The increased capacity, it is considered, would help reduce parking pressure within the village itself. As already referred to, the proposal would secure the installation of new drainage channels around the toilet block, which is marked in blue here. A new open water channel will be installed here. The existing open water channel, which is here, will be removed. The proposal would also widen the trail that passes to the south of the site. So this will become is wider than existing, and we will have new bollards and curbing along the edge. So here's some details of the curbs and bollards. Photographs of these can be seen on the following slides. So here we can see the curb to the top, and then the drainage channel infrastructure to the bottom, and then the open water channel to the top, and then the Manchester bollards that will be sited to the edge of the car park, which would come forward as part of the widening of the trail. Now a few photographs. This photo was taken to the west of the car park, and the dwellings nearest the site that I mentioned can be seen here, and then across Darfield Lane here. The access into the car park comes around here. The toilets and refreshment shop are out of shot to our left, so just off the left of shot here. Now we can see the trail as it passes along the edge of the car park with the existing bollards. As I say, this will be widened and your bollards sited along here. And this is taken from the eastern edge of the car park. The bridge is behind us at this point. The refreshment shop is just to the top right there. As you see, the trail passes along here. And then this is a final image from the entrance to the car park. You can note the condition of the existing surfacing. And the open water channel is in the middle of the shot here. So to conclude, the application is as stated recommended for approval. It is considered that the proposal would enhance the car park by increasing capacity while reducing parking pressure within the village, all without increasing the footprint of the car park. In fact, the footprint will be reduced to allow the widening of the trail as it passes to the south of the car park, thereby enhancing its functionality. Subject to the conditions, including the condition given as part of my update, subject to the condition given as part of my update, the scheme would also improve drainage from the site. These improvements will be made while having minimal adverse impacts on the value characteristics of the national park. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Seems straightforward to me. Right, we've got 3 lots of members. Going to start with Bill.
Yeah, so I can see that the car park probably needs some improvement, and that increased capacity is by defining the spaces, although there's various ways of doing that. I'm not sure the bollards, they seem very urban to me, very pretty actually, but they look good in centre of Manchester, but that. Most important point is, and we discussed this at the Peak Park Parishes Forum, and I certainly made a representation to that local plan, is about flood control, is that I would be proposing and seeing whether we can include something that we should be looking for areas of car parking to drain naturally, rather than, or have more natural drainage rather than drain off. I'm not sure where these drains go, but we should be setting standards whereby rainwater soaks in naturally rather than starting to collect it up and flow away, because that is a big problem. It's an acknowledged problem that big areas of tarmac are exacerbating flooding. So it's a lovely scheme, but if we are to sort of stand by climate change mitigation, then this is one way we can do it, and we need to set an example on our own sites where we have control. It would be hard to have a plan where we ask other people to do it. So I put that forward as a serious thing. And I'm just worried about the Manchester. I think they're lovely, those Manchester bollards, but I'm not sure this is the right place for them. So it's just this flooding, because there's a whole section of the local plan on flooding, and I think that we can make an impact here by doing something different. There are different designs, I'm sure. I'm not an engineer, but yeah.
Well, can we just deal with that? It seems to me that the Manchester bollards are the sort of thing you might find at a railway station, so I'm not too bothered about those. But what's this? Can you answer this drainage point?
In terms of the technical detail, the applicant actually is in the room. I don't know if he wants to comment. We've had some discussion, as I stated in the update. We are comfortable in terms of what the scheme I propose now will be an improvement of the drainage capacity at the sites. There's no stated flood risk at the moment, but this will be an improvement. And there are, in terms of making this a permeable surface, as stated, there are issues with that were being raised to us. And we're comfortable, subject to that condition recommended, that we will have the necessary information to ensure that not only is the drainage acceptable, there is actually going to be an improvement brought forward. We accept that condition is necessary, as I laid out, and we want to see that imposed. If you would like to add anything extra to that, please do so.
Thank you. No, I mean, just to really reiterate what's been said, we looked in great detail at permeable tarmac, and I think there's probably a bit of a misunderstanding about what that means. Generally, with permeable tarmac, you still have to have drains under it that take the water away, unless you've got very permeable ground, which we certainly haven't got here. And as John said, we'd also have to excavate significantly further down towards, we believe that the original platforms are buried under there somewhere. So we'd have to go between 300 and 500 mil down to create a sink that the drains then go in, and the water would end up in the same place anyway. The permeable tarmac wouldn't work in terms of it allowing it into the ground at this site.
Okay. Ginny.
Thank you. 3 questions. Have I missed it? Are there to be bike racks and EV charging?
Will there be bike racks and UV charging?
Yes, 5 bike racks. There's no EV charging because we've looked at it. We don't have the capacity on the supply on that site.
The bike racks are highlighted here.
Yeah. Right, thank you, John. And then the last one was, what increase in capacity do we believe we're getting from this?
7 cars is the way I read it.
Existing capacity is around 30, but as an informal basis. So obviously sometimes people don't park in a particularly efficient way, and that could be reduced, but the maximum we believe is on 30. So there's going to be an additional 7 formal spaces in addition to the 2 accessible parking spaces, and still some space left over for larger vehicles. So it's 7 plus those. So there is a clear increase in that capacity.
Ken, I hope you're going to say what I would hope you're going to say. Well, oh, sorry, did you have your hand up? And so I got Ken next, actually, but and I'll call you.
It's a comment about bollards. I'm not hung up about the style, but they're doing some work at bottom of our road and they couldn't get enough. We wanted 21, we could only get 10, so I hope your supplier's got plenty of bollards. And I will move the recommendation.
Okay, you're moving that. Rachel?
Basically, bollards, I think they're entirely inappropriate for the landscape that they sit in. I totally agree with your point, Bill. And thank you for your answer on the drainage, because I also had concerns, but you've answered that, and so that's satisfactory to me.
Those who are objecting to the bollards, I'm not raising a problem about this, but I'd like to be clear about what you envisage as an alternative. They're clearly there to keep the moving bicycles and stuff.
Yeah, totally understand that there needs to be bollards on site, but they don't need to look like that. That is what you would expect to see in a town centre, not what you would expect to see in a national park. And it should be something more in keeping with the materials in the landscape. Right. And presumably the design team could have a think about that.
So, Ken, would you be happy to accept a condition on top of your recommendation that the actual design of the bollards be reserved for future approval, bearing in mind... is that okay? Are you happy with that? I am, yes. Yes, okay. Are you happy with that? Okay. Right. On that basis, all those in favour? Those against? That's carried. Thank you. The next item we have is the monitoring and enforcement review. Adam, you doing this?
Thank you, Chair. I was saying to Matt earlier, now time for some light relief from our troubles with enforcement. And it's good news. You'll seen from the report, and I said the last quarter, we'd recently appointed a senior monitoring enforcement officer for the North area, and that's had an immediate impact, which has been absolutely fantastic. So this quarter we've closed 75 enforcement cases, which is in itself is more than half of our normal annual target. And a lot of that has been clearing out those older cases in the North area, which are either immune or not expedient to pursue. So we've made fantastic progress on that. And you'll see that the overall number of outstanding breaches, which are enforcement cases where we've identified that there is a breach, has reduced by about 50, so down to about 345, which is absolutely fantastic. And we are beginning to get down. I imagine when we sort of get under 300, we will be getting to the point where we are beginning to get properly on top of our casework and being able to take action as fast as we would like to be doing.
I'll find a few more for you.
Yeah. Thank you, Patrick. Appreciate it. So that's good news. The number of outstanding inquiries has gone up slightly. That's mainly due to the focus on getting the breaches down. But the inquiries that have been closed are the older ones, so that list is getting newer, which is also really good, because it's really important that list is triaged quickly and we make quick decisions on whether we're going to progress them or not, and then we can act accordingly and promptly. So that's all fantastic news. The only other update really I've got is on Home Farm Sheldon. I spoke to Angela about this yesterday, and all the news is that we have a date set for court, which will be the main event, as it were, and that is at Birmingham Crown Court on the 26th of February. So we'll be attending that.
Thank you very much. Very good news. Mike?
I've got some pictures as well to show you.
Okay, do you want to do your pictures first?
Yeah.
Good.
Not that many of them. This one's a fairly simple case. Something we deal with quite often, just where some rubble or some materials have been left on the ground and we have to investigate and contact the landowner and get them to be cleaned up. So this is on Oakbank. This is one of our older listed building cases, which we've been trying to get through and resolve. This one probably was we've received about 20 years ago, and got in touch with the owner, and a lot of these cases, satellite dishes are just left in situ. They're not actually used anymore. So with some goodwill, we encourage people to take them off. I asked them straight away. Again, similarly, sort of little details on historic buildings, satellite dishes, unauthorised flue pipes, little extensions, little blockwork extension, and they've all been removed as part of renovations to the property which we've been involved with. And this is one at Snake Cottage, Bamford, as you go up towards Glossop. The area to the side of this house had started to be excavated, and I think we had an application at the same time for something here which was refused, and that has now started to be cleaned up. Certainly the ground has been put back in. Hopefully looking for the wall to be restored if we can do. This is just, again, to spot the difference. This relates to a electric vehicle charger and socket on a listed building in Ashford-in-the-Water, which was put on without consent. And what you don't really see from that is it fronts onto the highway as well. So there's a bit of a highway issue with that. And that's been removed. Yeah, and they're all my pictures. But
Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you very much.
Sorry, Mike?
That's excellent work.
Ginny.
Yes. From your enforcement officers, particularly in whittling down the number outstanding. Yeah. I did wonder, though, with the EV charging point that you just showed there, is there an alternative for the applicant, like a freestanding charging point that they could put up? Because, you know, in most urban and suburban areas, we just attach them to the walls of our houses.
Yeah, potentially, yeah. That's something which we will look to explore. I think this particular proposal was subject to an application which was refused. So I'm not sure exactly where that would be. But yeah, if there's an option available which is acceptable from a highway point of view, and can be done without affecting the fabric, then something like that would be, really
it
good.
Would worry me if we've made that decision and there is no alternative way for them to install EV charging. The other one, which I'll ask, because probably be difficult for Patrick to ask, is the unauthorised, is it the Memorial Hall or the Village Hall in Taddington, and the rendering work there that is now immune from any action. I didn't think it had. I thought it was quite recent. So
well, yeah, it's this is the whole thing. So we received a complaint about it early last year. The information that we could find from, for example, Google Maps and Street View had quite a big gap between when the building looked like it did before and when it was changed. So it wasn't clear when exactly the works took place. But our sort of understanding from first looking at it was that it would possibly be in the last couple of years. We did speak to the landowner, I'll refer to the landowner, didn't get the information on when the works actually took place. What we received was a planning application, which, as you're all aware, we determined. Then, when that was refused, went back to the landowner to discuss what happens next, and again asked for information about when the works took place. And it transpires that the works took place approximately 4 years before the planning application was submitted. So the planning application was effectively a moot point, really, because it became immune at that point. So the facts are, unfortunately, that those operations did happen more than 4 years ago, and so they are now immune, unfortunately, despite the decision. Yeah.
So they managed to sneak it through. Well, at least we now know.
I've got Ginny next, and then Bill.
We might be going to talk about the same thing. First of all, really congratulations on getting these enforcement cases dealt with. It's really good to read this report. I would just make a request on Bank House that we revisit that one, because to me they've left some of the unauthorised development outside, which is what they are now securing their tents to. So I would just ask that we revisit that, because I think for their convenience, they've actually left some of the construction there.
I'm aware of that. Has the tent come back down now? Do you know, just for the local knowledge? Well, we'll look into that as well. But in terms of the enforcement notice, yes, the enforcement notice requires basically complete compliance, i.e. the whole structure to come down. That is correct. But then we also, as a planning authority, need to consider expediency and whether it would be in the public interest, for example, taking forward a prosecution on the basis that there's a small amount left. So we have to look in terms of public interest, whether it would be in the public interest to do that, to achieve that technicality. Now, that doesn't mean that we won't do it, but we still have to consider expediency and public interest in that. But we will look into that.
Right. And Bill, you got one as well? Yes.
Yeah, no, thank you. I was going to ask about that. Just a question. So when it says a lot of them are immune, does that all mean immunity because of time? Or is it immune for, just a clarification on that?
It will be because of time, yeah. What I do when I'm going through, if some of them will be granted planning permission, some of them will be removed, and the ones that are immune will be because of passage of time. But what I would say, it doesn't necessarily mean time has passed because we haven't taken action. It might be that it was reported, we investigated, and it was already immune, which is the case in Taddington was the case. The report came to us almost 4 years after it had been done. So if a member of the community had reported to it earlier, then we might have been able to do something about it.
So yeah, I'm going to thank you for that excellent report. So maybe if you feel, just because where it says immune, if there's anything you feel we should know extra, just a bit of information. Because I went through them and there's a lot of immunes. It sounds like, oh wow, you know, it's something's not working possibly, but it may be a bit more nuanced than that. And what does exemption certificate mean?
I'm presuming that's in relation to a caravan site. So some changes of use for caravan use, it's usually a use of a site for up to 5 caravans. That can be permitted development if there is an exemption certificate from an exempting authority.
Okay. And then there's one that said duplicate, so I don't, presumably it appears somewhere else, does it?
Yeah, it's quite common to have more than one complaint about unauthorised development, or sometimes it's simply that a site has got various things going on and they get merged together into one case. It's just administration, basically.
And I do like the before and after ones. I think, you know, keep those coming because I think they're really helpful. But I just think it's important that enforcement is almost more important than the actual plan, because without enforcement, nothing else that we do, including the local plan, including the planning application process and approval, doesn't mean anything if there isn't good enforcement. So it's really good work, and we need to carry on and commend you for it, but carry on with it, yeah.
Okay, can I just briefly raise one more? The blind bull at Little Hucklow, I thought that was listed. It's on page 171. And it says various features not in accordance with approved plans.
The blind bull isn't listed. It's the house next door is grade 2 star listed, but I believe the pub
so
itself.
So it was the house next door that we had the problems with
the source heat pump. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right. Sorry, Brian.
Just bigger picture in that respect. Getting those numbers down, you know, and it's just making decisions sometimes. Sometimes these were just sat there on the lists. Getting through those, whether they're immune or dealt with quickly or not, just clears that kind of psychological burden on the role of the officers. It just enables us to be more reactive. So actually, the more that those figures are coming down, the more agile we'll be, and I think things like immunity will be a lot more sharper on. So it's actually just a good trajectory picture.
It's very good. Right, move that we note the report. Is that seconded? And all those in favour? And the last report on the agenda is a single planning appeal.
Yeah, there was just one. Yeah.
No, but we've had 2 decisions in the last 2 days, which are not very good.
Yeah, they'll come. Well, there's one approved and one not. But so yeah, we'll get some next time.
Can I just say, and I've only just got one comment on that, is where it says variation condition 2, it would be more helpful just to say what that is. It doesn't take too long, because otherwise there's no point in putting it because it just, I have no idea what it is, and it's also in Haverford, it should be quite useful. So just where it says, because I think that happens quite a lot, there's variations or removal of conditions, but it doesn't tell us anything, if that makes sense.
It's a good
It
point.
does make sense, and you have the same problem if you look up what the planning applications we get.
Yeah.
Application to various ends, so you don't know what it's about.
If it was a decision, it would be unpacked and would describe it. So it's actually a good point. I could do the same for those as well.
Yeah. So what is do you know what it is? That doesn't matter.
And I should have noted on the way through that Hartington
we can adjourn again.
parish local plan is being deferred for technical reasons. Right, does that bring us to the end? Good. And we're only 3 minutes after past, so that's not too bad. Thank you for your attendance, and see you in February.